Hello, everyone. Hopefully, everything's great with you guys. Just doing a little surprise podcast with my buddy here, G-Man Lives. How you doing, G-Man?
Good man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's been too long. I think we're kind of bumped elbows, so to speak, last couple of years. I think I've followed your channel since 2017. I've seen like you've covered more first-person shooters than I think most people realize exist. So you've been
Yeah, yeah.
you always come up
And I
when
think
a
we've kind of been mutual on Twitter for a while too. I think just kind of sharing very similar takes on games and movies and stuff. So yeah, it's good to finally have a chat to you.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, no, I really respect your work, your work ethic, and you've covered so many of my favorite games. You know, the Doom games, Heretic, FPSs. You know, Double Helix, just all these like games from my childhood. And yeah, we've kind of bumped elbows on Twitter a few times, but I think we have a pretty similar outlook on, say, like this. I don't know if there's a better word for it, but like the simulated world entertainment, like Dark City, The Matrix, things like that. But you've been recently replaying Path of Neo for upcoming project, I hear, and I've recently dug really into the Matrix trilogy. Watched the new movie, unfortunately, and a lot of the behind the scenes kind of development stuff. So I think we'll have an interesting talk about all this stuff. So
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, Matrix, the original Matrix and all that stuff. Like that was, when I was a 13-year-old kid, man, that was where it all started. I think getting into gaming and all that kind of that sort of subculture. So yeah, definitely.
yeah, I think I was 14. I think when it was perfect. I was told that we're going to see The Matrix, and I was dragged to the theater after some family members had seen it, and I knew nothing about the film. I had missed the trailers. I knew nothing, and that's like the best way to see a movie. Is just go in there completely blind without any sort of expectations or knowing anything about it. Because I think, if you remember, I think that the marketing for that movie was fantastic. It was like nobody can tell you what the Matrix is. You have to discover it for yourself. That's such a great mystery hook to get people in, and that's the best way to watch it. I don't know how you first saw it, if you managed to get it in theaters or saw it on VHS or whatever, but
Yeah, well, I mean, in Australia, like it was obviously different in other countries, but the only trailer I can ever remember seeing for it was like this really like short 10-second commercial where it was just the scene when Morpheus is chatting to Neo and he's like, you got to let it all go, fear, doubt, disbelief, blah blah blah. Then he does the jump across the building, and it just ended with Neo going whoa, and then it came up with like, what is the Matrix? That was the only trailer that I can remember seeing before I saw the film. And then my best mate at the time saw it before I did, and he was like, "Oh, dude, you've got to see this movie called The Matrix." And I was like, "Oh, okay, whatever." You're a 13-year-old kid, and yeah, we went to the cinema on the weekend, and yeah, the rest is history. I mean, we actually saw it twice that weekend as well. So we saw it in the morning on a Saturday, from what I remember. We got out of the cinema, we went home to our parents and said, "Can we see that movie again?" So we went back in the Arvo, and then on the Sunday we went back and yeah, we saw it a third time. So I saw it three times the first weekend it came out. So that's how my first experience with it was.
yeah, same here. When I was taken there first time, I'm like, I want to see this again, and I think saw it at least two or three times, at least two, if not three times in the theater. I rode my bike multiple times to see Reloaded in the theater because I was on that hype train for a while.
Yeah,
Uh,
me too.
yeah, but yeah, I can't remember the last time. I think the last time I went to go see a movie multiple times in the theater was probably Inception. Like it's been a long time since I've gone back and wanted to see a movie. Like what now I see movies like that was fine. So I don't know if it's like just getting more mature, getting older, whatever, or just movies don't quite have the same staying power as they did back then. But yeah, something about
Yeah,
yeah,
it's definitely it's a different. I don't know. Movies just aren't quite the same. I was kind of tempted to go back and watch that Spider-Man, the recent one again, because I had a pretty good response with that in the cinema. I just thought that was just pure like popcorn entertainment, man. But yeah, like I've never really had that desire to go back and see a movie again. For a long, long time. Definitely.
yeah, me neither. I actually really liked No Way Home as well. I was expecting nothing, and it's one of those like I could see flashes of Spider-Man 3 and Marvel Endgame, where it's just like you got too much going on here. This isn't going to work, but they managed to do a pretty good job, and it was definitely a crowd pleaser. But I was surprised how much I liked that. Some things worked better than others. I was shocked at how well Andrew Garfield worked in that movie. He's like, he kind of stole the movie for me, but yeah, no, but yeah, I don't have any like deep desire to go back and see Spider-Man. Whereas, you know, Matrix, as soon as the credits ended, I'm like, I want to see this again. Just like I don't know about, I'm a big Lord of the Rings fan. After I saw Fellowship the first time, I'm like, I'm coming back here tomorrow, kind of thing. So
Yeah, yeah. I think it's funny too because it's like back then, like it sounds like cliche saying it, but there really wasn't like a movie like that. Like we just hadn't had a film, especially with the action scenes. Like I'd never seen a movie that was like that action packed in a cinema before. Like I think you could just spend hours talking about how it like innovated movie action, but like there's like the line in it when Trinity says, no one's ever done anything like this before. And that is just so ironic in a
yeah.
way because that's like they're talking about like the movie. Like the next scene after that with the lobby is just like when you see that for the first time as a kid, it really is just like blows your mind. You've never seen something that's just that scale of awesomeness, to put it kind of simply.
Yeah, absolutely. It was an absolute game changer, and as I went over in my last scripted video, it's not all original, but it was new to the mainstream audience for sure. Like we were just talking about how great Hard Boiled is with John
Yeah.
Woo and stuff like that, and you can if you watch that early John Woo stuff, and even some of his American stuff, like you see a little bit of it in Mission Impossible 2 and Face Off, but mostly in like Hard Boiled and his older stuff you definitely see the action scenes borrowed a lot from John Woo style sort of
Yeah.
every single doorknob and every single window is made out of explosives and it also goes like splattering across the screen and glorious like sort of a symphony of violence or whatever. But
Yeah.
yeah, we get some of that.
Hardboiled's like the poster child for over the top action scenes. And even like a Better Tomorrow 1 and 2 I think have some pretty ludicrous action in them. But yeah, they definitely borrowed a lot from John Woo, I think, for that shootout in the lobby.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody kind of references the hospital scene where it just gets like over the top explosives, jumping through windows, shotguns. I love how shotguns are basically packed with C4, where it's just they explode everything. It's pretty
There's like
great.
one shot in that when from memory where he shoots at someone like through a window and the dude like flies through the window. Like
Yeah,
somehow the shotgun propels someone forward through a window. Like it just like gravity defying, shotgun pellets in that scene, man. But it's so awesome and over the top.
yeah. It makes sense until you like use your brain and you realize the only reason shotguns damage is because they go through people. They don't push them. Because if they
Yeah.
just push the person, then they'd be fine. But yeah, it's funny how all that kind of stuff works in movie format. But yeah, no, I really admire the different references and the different obscure stuff that the Matrix kind of brought to the mainstream. Like the kind of
Mm.
Iron Monkey style kung fu, Bruce Lee kind of stuff, which that got into the mainstream a bit, but like the kind of Hong Kong choreography, like they actually hired
Yeah, Win Yu Ping. Yeah.
yeah, Yun Ping, yeah, he's
Yeah.
absolute master of his craft, and kind of jumping ahead, I was hoping we kind of dig into Dark City first because I know that it's eventually we're just gonna be talking about the Matrix for hours, but um, yeah, I really admire that they got the original cast and crew together and trained them for I think it was conflicting reports. It's like 4 months. They trained them hardcore training to get the actors to do the stunts on camera. Like
For
there was
the first Matrix, you mean?
yeah for the first Matrix,
Yeah,
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 and
yeah. I was about to say, I don't think they did that for Matrix Resurrections.
no, I don't even know if any of them do any of their own stunts. But to put it in perspective, the entire intro of the Matrix, for example, that was 100% Carrie Ann Moss. There's no stunt work
Yeah.
whatsoever. Like that's incredible. She's like a Canadian theatrical, actress. She's not a martial artist or anywhere trained in like stunts and stuff like that. So the idea that they got these actors on camera to perform, pretty. They definitely sell their talent pretty well, and Yun Ping actually like kind of made them develop their own unique styles. Like you can tell that Hugo Weaving has more of a brute force, like punching through walls and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Trinity is a lot more kind of agile and cat-like. Everybody kind of developed their own sort of fighting style to it, and there's actually some behind the scenes stuff talking about that. But yeah, no, just the production is just insane. Some of those, the lengths they went through to get this compelling, interesting action movie that also had some some kind of brains behind it too, which is rare at the
Yeah.
time when you think about it. Like, I love Die Hard and it's a well constructed story, but there's nothing really beyond the fact that he's got to get out of the building and save his wife, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, well, there's just like an element of like respect, like you say, like the fact that I mean respect to like Win Yu Ping and like the people that are helping them create the action scenes, but then also like it carries across into just how the film looks.
Yeah.
Like I know, I mean, it doesn't really compare to like the Hong Kong kung fu movies, but you have some shots in like that first Matrix movie when they're fighting each other, and it's like long shots, man, where it probably goes on for 4 or 5 seconds, which isn't much really in contrast to those films, but for like an American film to show that much choreography without cutting like every single time someone punches someone, and that's why those fight scenes still stand up. Like I think we probably both rewatched those movies recently, with the fourth one coming out, and like the scene when Smith's fighting Neo in like the train station. Like there's punches in that scene where it's like if either of those actors didn't duck or didn't do their choreographed move, it looks like they would have got knocked out. Like they would have had a shiner from that. Do you know what I mean? They would have caught like a boot to the face or like been punched right in the head, stuff like that. So I think that's part of why those movies still stand up so well. And yeah, not to jump forward, but why that stuff in Resurrections is just a mess. Like there's just doesn't feel like any respect given to the craft of like martial arts in that way, which was like one of the biggest components, the original, right?
Yeah, and I think it's the kind of practicality and the physicality that really makes it so exciting because before then, stunt work and fight scenes quite often would use camera angles and tricks to really hide the fact that these weren't really the actors doing these things. It
Mm.
wasn't. I think The Matrix was one of the first movies that really got just drama students basically to perform on camera, and I think that really elevated the film because you're not just seeing the back of a stunt double with a wig on. You're actually seeing these Keanu Reeves, kick ass, and that really
Yeah.
made it very exciting. Nothing against stunt people. I think that they're doing incredible work and they're absolutely necessary in some cases. Like there were scenes where they had to like crane somebody at pretty fast motion into a wall and crush the wall with their bodies. Like I wouldn't want to do
Oh,
that
that's
on a Monday
yeah.
morning.
Yeah, I think the Trinity, the thing when she smacks into the skyscraper, they said like Carrie Ann Moss, from what I remember hearing about it or watching about it, was that she wanted to do that stunt. When she jumps out of the chopper and she like
Yeah.
smashes into the window, but they were like, nah, like for insurance reasons or something. I think they said a stunt woman did it, and she ended up like breaking her shoulder or dislocating her shoulder. So, and that's on camera. Is that's like a person smashing into a wall and like breaking their shoulder, and that's that adds to the shot. As awful as it is to say that it looks cool because someone hurt themselves, but like that's part of what captures it as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's just that raw physicality. Is you don't really see that so much in modern movies because they're usually always in a green screen room or stunt double or that the thing that they crash into wasn't real. I
Yeah.
immediately thought of a really kind of guerrilla shot, a low budget movie that everybody knows, Mad Max. In that, there's one shot in that movie I'm sure you're familiar with where,
Yeah, of course.
yes, a motorcyclist runs over somebody's head, and that's in the final
Yeah,
film, and that was
and
not
actually hit
intent.
their head. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
like that guy. I'm hoping he was okay after that, but that looked like it hurt a lot. Like,
Yeah, I actually knew someone whose uncle was in one of the Mad Max films. I think he was in number two, maybe,
oh yeah,
and
Road
he was
Warrior.
involved in
Yeah,
one of yeah, he was involved in one of the stunts at the end when there's like the massive chase scene.
yeah,
And he was a guy on one of like the buggy carts or something. And the story goes that like he basically ripped his face off when he fell off this thing or something. Or, you know what I mean? Like the skin got like torn off his face.
yeah,
But they just sewed him back on, and he still looks. I saw photos of the guy. He still just looks normal, but that was the kind of level of safety and crazy ass stunts they were doing back then. But again, like you see it on the movie, and you're like, that's amazing. Like that looks awesome, but you never stop to think about the health ramifications of some of that stuff,
yeah.
And it's a lot, like you say, it's lost with CGI. Like you just don't get that anymore. And Matrix felt like it was maybe on the cusp of that as well. Like before we just started going full blown CGI shortcuts for everything.
Yeah, and we'll definitely get into that, the kind of transition between 1999 Matrix and 2003 Matrix. But
Mm.
I think just because I think we have so much to talk about the Matrix series, I think we should I dig into Dark City first because we're both fans of this movie as well, and it naturally because it's one film and it didn't do as well in the box office, it gets got kind of overshadowed by the Matrix. So
Yep.
let's jump over to that real quick because I think we both have a lot to say about that as well. So Dark City. Do I have any good clips for Dark City? I'm gonna have to turn on. Oops, turn off that audio. So apologies for the really irritating. For those watching, apologies for the really irritating overlay. It's just copyright. Uh, so yeah, Dark City. I didn't see this until I think VHS. I kind of missed this in the theaters. I think my brother saw it in theaters, and he had pretty good reaction to it. But as you and I both recall, the theatrical cut wasn't great. When did you first see Dark City?
I first saw it on like it was called Optus Cable or Optus TV or something, which is like a well, now they're a mobile phone company in Australia, but yeah, back then they had a cable thing on TV, and they used to just have these movie channels. And Dark City was just one of those movies that it seemed like every time I put the TV on, that thing was like playing for some reason. So I just kind of kept watching it, man. And luckily, the first time I saw it, I didn't know what the whole twist was. Because you're just flicking through channels, and then Dark City comes up, and it was somewhere around the start when he's getting chased. And I mean, that's seeing a dude getting chased by weird, creepy men in trench coats is enough to get anyone's attention. And yeah, that's just how I kind of got into it. Like, it wasn't a movie I probably ever would have seen in the cinema, because I don't even think it really got marketed very well in Australia, which is funny because I think a lot of it was filmed in Australia. But yeah, that was just sort of my introduction to it, and it looks awesome. I mean, it looks very sort of like comic book brought to life in a lot of ways, with the shadows and the way everything's kind of constructed. So, man, that was enough to hook me. Yeah.
Yeah, similarly to The Matrix, which came out a year later, I saw a lot of the concept art for the movie, and it was very much like a comic book presentation. Very, very harsh, dark shadows on people's faces, very grim, and obviously Alex Proyas, coming off of The Crow, which I
Pro,
still
yeah.
love. I love The Crow.
Yeah, it's
He
fantastic.
is very gothic, very noir, all sorts of stuff like that. Like visually, the movie really, really holds up for a lot of reasons. Primarily because outside of a couple CGI effects, like we're doing full spoilers, but full
Mhm.
spoilers, by the way, in chat. So don't add us with spoiler stuff. The aliens obviously coming out of the heads, that's CGI, but it actually surprisingly holds up pretty well. The alien CGI is pretty good. It's possible they used other effects too. It looked kind of like CGI. The last fight scene I think looks a little goofy. It hasn't
Yeah,
dated as well, but they kind of built like a miniature city for this movie. Like they actually built entire sets, like the rooftops, a lot of the interesting, uh, various buildings and things. They put a lot of work into it, and they used the CG, I think, to kind of warp the buildings, kind of like to what is it called, interpolation, where they kind of morph one image to the next. I don't know exactly how they achieve that effect, but
yeah,
you
I
can
know
see
what you
that.
mean. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, but they use like computers to do that, and it has a couple scenes where you're like, yeah, looks a little 90s, but visually it's also a very, very compelling film. And yeah, this was like a passion project for Alex. I found the earliest draft I could of his script, and I think it goes back even further. He was trying to make that movie back as early as 1982, so
right.
it was a big long project for him. But I think it really gets it's gotten kind of like a lot of what do you call it, sort of underdog status now, because it
Yeah,
was
it's like
kind
a
of
cult
overlooked.
status. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
it's definitely more appreciated now.
yeah, and unfortunately, and this is all documented in documentaries and stuff. Unfortunately, I think the studios said the movie was too dense, it was too difficult to figure out, so that they asked for the kind of introductory monologue, which nobody liked. They,
Yeah, it's just give away your whole film, in the
yeah,
first 10 seconds of it. It's like, let's start Empire Strikes Back and have a voiceover, saying who Darth Vader is at the start of the movie, kind of thing. It's just that stupid to do it.
yeah, it's like I can't even come up with a good example, but basically they spell out the entire plot. There's aliens. They're
Hmm.
trying to figure out how we work because they're dying, and this is their story. And they give away everything but the twist. Which, honestly, once you have that sort of setup, it's not too crazy to think that this city may not be real either. But yeah, the twist. If you watch this movie from the right perspective, I think the twist is a really good payoff. I think it's really amazing when you see like just that visual of William Hurt like floating away and seeing that
Yeah,
the
the
city is,
nothing basically. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
just nothing in the middle of the space, which is really kind of a stark, kind of chilling visual.
But
And
I always thought that that was part and parcel of like the fun of that movie. I mean, like the city reveal is kind of a big thing, but just the whole setup of ruining what is happening just with the aliens. I mean, that alone I feel just kind of ruins the whole film, though. You know, like I
yeah,
think the twist is cool, but coming to that journey like together and figuring that all out by yourself without being told it, yeah, I don't know. Like I think it needs to be experienced that way. But then I've heard too that like originally I was like, oh yeah, the director's cut's the way to go. But I've kind of heard now in retrospect people saying that director's cut isn't actually as good in some ways. Like I haven't really watched them side by side, but it's like certain shots linger a bit longer than they're supposed to, and there's like minor edits here and there, which kind of bum me out a little bit.
yeah. I definitely know what you're talking about. I have not watched them back to back. It's actually hard to find the original cut in HD nowadays.
Yeah,
The the one that you generally see now is the director's cut, but I've heard that the editing has been subtly changed in the director's cut, where they, like you said, have more breathing room here and there. It's kind of a
and the
style.
lighting's different. I've read too that like the lighting's complete, like the film grading also is like completely
Yeah,
different in some shots. Yeah,
yeah, I could see that for sure. But yeah, I've heard that the original edit is a lot more frantic, so
mm,
it kind of matches his Murdoch's sort of frantic, sort of like, oh, what's going on, what's happening, who are these people, why are they coming after me? So it kind of matches the editing kind of matches his sort of emotional state at the time.
yeah,
But I do think that Director Scott is the superior version, just for the fact that they don't spell out the entire sort of conflict in the beginning intro. You know, as much as I
yeah.
like Kiefer Sutherland and his voice is like gold, but yeah, that was not a good call. But I will say that I feel there's a couple issues with the film that prevent me from thinking that Dark City, even its director's cut, is like perfect. I think they kind of rush the they rush the reveal a little fast. I think it's around the 20-minute mark is when it's kind of like the uh, the scene where they first find out that the people chasing him are not human. I thought that was a
Yeah.
little too quick.
Oh,
Um,
when they have like the sort of the fight scene on top of the billboard or whatever it is.
yeah, and
Yeah.
that scene I think does a couple things wrong personally. Like, if you watch it again, it's actually kind of funny. We've been replaying it here in the background a couple times, but it's actually kind of funny. The most of them die by accident.
Yeah, one of them falls into the ropes, and it's never really makes sense how that one dude gets his head sort of chopped off by the
Yeah,
sign that's not really anywhere near him, but somehow it chops his head open.
chops his skull wide open
Yeah, clean open.
accidentally.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and I'm like, is that like a is that like a table saw or something? I thought it's just a little sign that dangles her arm or something like that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, it's not great action, but like the whole vibe of it is cool. Like
yeah,
the what do you call it? Like the drama of that scene and sort of the tension there is pretty high. So it
yeah.
still kind of works.
I'm a huge fan of like sci-fi noir, like Blade Runner and this and things like that. So like whenever you kind of
Yeah,
mix that sort of classic, sort of Maltese Falcon, Casablanca style with sci-fi, I just love it. And this movie really has atmosphere in spades. Like I love the way that the city kind of looks and the way it's lit, especially the lighting in this movie really doesn't get mentioned enough. How really incredibly lit every scene is, just the kind of shadows, the dark shadows, while also revealing people's faces. A lot of work went into that, I'm sure, and his experience in The Crow probably helped a lot because that had a lot of kind of really dramatic, dark, broody lighting and things like that. But yeah, the first fight scene where you see him kind of realize he can do his powers, not quite in control yet, but he can like manipulate reality. It's
yeah,
really cool, but the way he kills them is kind of accidental, and it's kind of like a almost like a theme you could criticize about this film is that Murdoch is kind of accidentally saves the day in the end,
yeah. Well, at
which is
that point too, he's still a little bit sort of disoriented. Like to
sure,
give him credit, you know what I mean? Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
later on when he finally learns how to use it, he can do some pretty cool shit. But
yeah,
I think the first, yeah, like you say, maybe the first 20 minutes of that movie, man, is from memory is just like it's so perfectly paced with like he
Yeah.
wakes up and you just got this like constant like music in the background that's just it's not like really overbearing, but it's this really cool like sort of subtle soundtrack going in the background. He's trying to piece all these things together, and I think the sound design in that movie is fantastic too. There's like that sound effect that plays whenever he like remembers something, and
Yeah.
it's like it's obviously a sound playing backwards, but there's like that scene when he's like trying to remember and it just keeps cutting back to the like vision of him as a kid, and it's like playing that really creepy like electronic sound. And
Yeah.
there's that bit too when he's walking through that room and everyone's asleep, and then it plays like the sound of like a motor starting up again or something, and everyone kind of clicks back to life. Like, yeah, it's perfect setup.
Yeah, no, I think my favorite scene in the movie is when the whole city goes to sleep. That's just a creepy, creepy visual. I love that whole sequence where like the clock strikes 12 and then just people shut off. Even the
Yeah,
trains shut off, the traffic stops, everything just shuts down. And then we see all
yeah,
these things kind of twist and he's never seen this before. He's awake for some reason. Like how crazy would that be if all of a sudden the world shut down and you were still awake? Like that'd be
yeah.
it's straight out of a nightmare, and that's kind of what this movie really captures, that sort of nightmarish quality really well. But yeah, the like the sound design really deserves some praise too. Like I probably don't remember the soundtrack as well as I do say The Matrix, but I love the flashback scenes because they play basically. It seems like they play a sped up version of the soundtrack in reverse. So it sounds
Yeah.
like either piano or strings in reverse. So it sounds like you're kind of like rewinding a video while still listening to it. And it's a great sort of interesting kind of take because they almost treat memory like they were just overriding your tape,
Like a tape, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's actually not. Yeah, it's actually not in the soundtrack because I had the soundtrack on CD,
Okay.
and it's not. Yeah, like the like I'm saying that my favorite part of the movie is really that first setup when I think he's chatting to the guy who owns the hotel, and the guy's saying, "Oh, you checked in on this day," and blah blah blah, and then he finds the postcard, and that's like triggering memories. But yeah, you listen to the music. I think Trevor Jones, I think is a composer off the top of my head, but yeah, it's not in the music, so it's obviously like sound work, like sound foley or whatever that they've done. So that's why I'm saying like I don't think that movie gets credited for so many things, but I've never really heard people touch on that sound specifically, like that part of it, you know. And even the
Yeah.
scene when he's in the little cafe and he's like, you know, what do you call those cafes where it's got the little windows where you know put your
It was
coin
like
in
the
and grab.
automat or whatever I think in the film.
Yeah, and like
Yeah.
the clicking of that stuff, it's so well done, like that aspect of the movie. Not to go away from the rest of the film, but yeah, that's one sort of avenue of that movie I think that also just doesn't get enough praise. You know, it's so wholesome how all these like little elements come together in this film to make it so unique.
Yeah, and I love the sort of general I don't know, the indistinct time period you're in. It's like you've got kind of old school cars, but you also have like this automat, which isn't really a thing, or at least it hasn't been really a thing in America for a while. It was kind of foreign to me, so it had this sort of anachronistic sort of feel where you're not really sure if it's modern times, if this is in the 50s, if it's in the
Yeah,
30s, and it's really interesting, especially from retrospective of the aliens were kind of trying to recreate what they think that humans would think is real or modern, but
yeah,
they messed up a little bit. And it not only does it create great visuals, but it also it's kind of makes sense in that they don't quite know how humans are, and so they kind of got things wrong. Like, what's the difference between 1940s and 1960s? Who cares?
yeah. Which was the biggest comparison you make to the Matrix, as well. Like in the way that like, so not to jump ahead
Yeah.
too quick, but yeah, no, because yeah, I had a discussion with a mate recently, and he was saying, "Oh, I watched the Matrix, and it's like it's so 90s, man. Like all the stuff in it, like with the city and that." I'm like, but dude, it's not like that construct of the Matrix is just what the machines have created to kind of keep humans placid. Like it's not, as far as I know, like the Matrix, the city in that is not set in the 90s. Like it's set, what, hundreds of years in the future after we've had the wars and that. Like it's the same thing you say with Dark City, where it's like it's their interpretation of what they think they need to create to keep humans like playing along with this overall plan. Do you know what I mean? It's like for some reason we just kind of work better in this like city environment, and it's the exact same thing you're saying with Dark City, where it's like, yeah, are we in the 1920s here or the 30s or like what's going on here?
Yeah, I think that Matrix does it a little bit more subtly, obviously, because it's not quite as weird and gothic and noir. But I do like it that in both movies, there's never any like specific names. It's just like they refer to it as the city or so and so, and
Yeah.
it's like
Or the freeway. Yeah.
it's
We're
kept
on the freeway.
yeah, it's just kept very generic and but not in a bad way, but in a it's kept indistinct, I should say. Or it's just kind of
Yeah.
like it could be any city, and I think that works beautifully for those kind of films because it is sort of just like doesn't matter where you are, it's not real. It's just kind of an illusion, and don't ask questions. Like that's a really common theme in these kind of movies. It's like the idea that you just do your day to day, don't ask questions, just accept things how they are, no
Yeah.
matter how weird they get. And that's, I guess that kind of reflects on how people were feeling toward the end of the 90s, where just everybody was like questioning things and fighting back normalcy and stuff like that. So you could kind of see the culture reflected in these movies, I think, a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And then obviously Resurrections completely ruins it in that one scene where like, hey, we're in Japan. It's like, oh, okay, so we have geography now in the Matrix. Cool.
Yeah,
Let's just totally change the last three films and everything that came before it.
it's really irritating, but yeah, we were jumping ahead.
Yeah, way ahead.
Yeah, I know that it is interesting. Another parallel. I don't know if you're a fan of Blade Runner, but
Massive, huge.
yeah, me too. One interesting parallel between Darksteady and Blade Runner is they got the exact same treatment. They got released, Blade Runner 82, Darksteady 1998, and exactly 10 years later, not on the day, but 10 years later for both of them, they got their director's cut, which they cut out the monologue at the beginning. Both the movies got that same exact treatment. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, Harrison Ford. I don't think I've really seen the original Blade Runner because I know there's like all those early versions where yeah, the Harrison Ford voiceover
Yeah.
was in there, which was apparently dreadful. But I've never seen like the original version of that. I don't think.
That was the first version I saw, and I didn't hate it. I thought it kind of fit because I liked sort of the detective monologue sort of idea, but in retrospect, it's better without it. I will say one caveat. I don't know if it was in the original, because there's actually Blade Runner. I could talk about Blade Runner for hours too, but Blade Runner's actually got a ton of cut content too, almost
Yeah.
45 minutes of cut scenes. So they actually, I think for the DVD release, I want to say, they actually, instead of just having deleted scene one, deleted scene two, deleted scene three, they took all the deleted scenes that they had in chronological sequence and cut that into an alternate. But if you can find it, it's like watching a Blade Runner that was made in like the Bizarro verse or something like that, because like everything's different. Like in one shot, he's like reading a different newspaper thing in his car. There's scenes from the Blade Runner guy film, but he's actually alive. Deckard talks to him a few times, and
Oh, I've seen that. But yeah, the guy's in the hospital. He's on like a masseuse chair, or not a masseuse chair, but it's like that thing where his face is planted through the chair, basically.
yeah, exactly. And it's like weird, and they're like, but they're also on camera so that their superiors know. It's a bunch of weird stuff, but I forgot my exact point about that. But oh yeah, no, there's a couple scenes in that all the deleted scenes that actually have monologue that I think actually help a little bit. There's one shot after, again, spoilers. I think he shoots Zora. I think that's her name. When she
Yeah.
gets shot through the glass and falls down. There's a after the aftermath of that killing. There's a monologue about how Deckard lost his wife years ago because he kept on showing up with blood on his clothes, and he had explained it's like, oh, replicant, no big deal, retirement, whatever. But that it just kind of shows like how messed up his life is, that he has to like
Yeah.
kill these organic bleeding beings for a living, and
Yeah.
it really kind of emphasizes how much he wanted to get away from all that, because he's, if anything, is really uh what do you call it, kind of he's not into doing the Blade Runner thing anymore. We know that
Yeah,
from
he
the
was very
beginning.
reluctant to come back and do this last contract. Obviously, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that's the word I was looking for, reluctant. Yeah, so I,
yeah.
I, I like that aspect a lot, and that's missing a little bit from the final film. I've seen, I think, 3 or 4 different versions of Blade Runner. There's even an international cut, which I never saw, but
Yeah.
yeah, revealed toward the end, but the Dark City edit, pretty much after the intro, is a lot more subtle. There's like more time given, less time given, but for the most part, the events play out pretty much the same in both cuts. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Just giving away that one big twist, even though it's not really like the twist, but I still think it kind of ruins the mystery of who the strangers are. You know, right off the bat, it's like, okay, well, that's who those people are. When he's
yeah,
getting chased out of the hotel at the start, it's okay. Well, you know exactly who they are. It makes perfect sense. It just kind of ruins that mystique.
yeah, it does because
But yeah, not to say that it's not to make yeah, it's not like a dreadful version of the movie, but it's probably not ideal.
yeah, because I originally saw it in VHS, and for 10 years you could only get that version, so it wasn't a bad version of the movie because people still liked it, but
Yeah.
see, knowing the reveal shot kind of gets undermined when you already know what they are. It's cool.
Mm.
The visual of a squid like thing creeping out of somebody's skull is still awesome, but it's not as surprising if you assume that these people are human to begin with. So
Yeah. Yeah. Plus,
so
just the whole setup with all of them having different like weird little names and stuff. Like they're all like what is it, like Mister Hand and stuff like that. They all have these.
yeah,
It's very like cool and like creepy the way they all like talk to each. And I think they talk in the third person or something as well sometimes. Like they have this really weird way of speaking to each other.
they're a
Yeah,
hive
it's just
mind. Yeah, they're a hive
yeah,
mind. So they're always talking as we. Um,
yeah,
I love Mr. Hand, by the way. He's awesome. I forget the actor's name, but he
yeah. It's the Rocky Horror Picture Show guy.
yeah, he
He's
wrote
in it.
Rocky. Weird enough. Mr. Hand wrote Rocky Horror Picture Show. So, weirdest
Yeah,
thing ever. Yeah,
yeah,
but he really I think kind of steals the movie because he's such an interesting character because he's the one stranger that forms an identity of his own because he gets injected with the memories that Murdoch is supposed to have. You know, his
yeah.
artificial
He's the
memories.
Mr. Smith. He's like the Agent
Yeah,
Smith of Dark City, man. Like he gets the vendetta against Murdoch. Like it's very similar with that whole setup between the two of them. That's like his
yeah.
sort of nemesis the whole time. Yeah. He
But
kind of breaks the rules because he just doesn't, what he knows what he's supposed to do, but he kind of has to go outside the bounds to, get the job done.
yeah, it's really he's an interesting character, and I love his performance too. I've not really seen many movies with him, but he really kind of steals each scene he's in. Another
Mm.
weird little thing about that beginning scene, which I have some problems with, he accidentally kills a couple people, a couple of the strangers in that shot, accidentally slash, accidentally uses his ability to remove the floor under one, and the other one I think just like falls through an already rickety platform. That
Yeah, he
one's a
does.
complete
Yeah.
accidental death.
Takes a step and then falls to and then chokes himself to death. Oh, I don't think I don't think he dies because he comes back later. But yeah, if he falls into the ropes and just stands there choking the whole scene.
Yeah, and here's an interesting thing. I'm pretty sure I've watched it a couple times. I'm pretty sure it's hard to tell exactly. I think Mr. Hand dies in that scene. So I think that might be a mistake. Either I'm missing something, but Mr. Hand falls. You don't see him die because that would actually kind of be
Uh,
a plot hole
yeah,
because they can fly, but it
they
looks
can
like
fly now. Yeah,
they fly now. They fly now.
they fly now.
Oh, yeah, we were talking about Star Wars prequels, sequels earlier before the stream started. So I don't know if we're going to get into that conversation, but now that we're talking about it, I almost want to do another one of these for the Mad Max movies and stuff because I
Yeah,
think we have a
that'd be
lot of
cool. Yeah.
yeah, because there's also some games too, so that'd be fun.
Actually, yeah, you're talking about. I saw Fury Road twice in the cinema. There you go. We were talking about that before. I couldn't remember. That was the first movie I saw twice in the cinema for God knows how long, because I just fucking
Yeah,
love that movie.
that
Yeah.
I had no expectations for that, but that movie was so good. I love that movie a lot. That was great.
Yeah.
That was
But
that.
no, what I think just to go back, I think Mr. Hand he flies back up, doesn't he? He starts attacking him with a knife, from what I remember.
I'd have to watch it again, but I just I had some issues with that scene, just like how accidental it all was. I just thought it was
Mm,
hilarious that one of the strangers died purely by freak accident without any
yeah,
powers involved. But I think he falls, but we don't actually see him die, so it's technically not a plot hole, and they can
yeah,
fly, so there is a way for him to get out of it, even if he did fall. But
yeah.
yeah,
I like the creepy kid in it too, the little creepy one for some reason who's possessed like a child's body. That's such a cool concept as well.
yeah, yeah, because there's a little bit of lore. It's like one line, but I think when Kiefer Sutherland is talking about who they actually are, they say
Well,
that
they possess corpses, don't they? Yeah,
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 they possess corpses. So like a child died, and so they use that as a vessel. So this is like
yeah,
some ancient 1,000-something-year-old alien, malevolent alien inhabiting a deceased child's body, and there's something really creepy about that concept, which I love.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Very,
very cool.
yeah, it's kind of odd. Actually, I saw the concept art. I think that the original, that scene with the little kid like bites his hand. I always thought that was
Mm.
weird because he has a knife too. So like, why doesn't he cut his hand off? But
Yeah, it's just like toying with the food, right? It's just sort of for the
yeah,
dramatic effect of just being a little creepy fucker.
yeah, it definitely works out as being a little creepy fucker. But I think the original concept art is that he stabs the hand. But
Oh, okay.
I guess they might have thought it was even creepier to have him bite it. But yeah, minor detail doesn't really affect the film. I still think that works really well. And just seeing those sets, like those physical sets, like they probably had a building sized prop on wheels to make that scene where the two buildings
Hands
kind of
moving. Yeah.
uh,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
collapse and stuff. And
Mm.
yeah, like the big clock face under the statue, just really inspired stuff that goes all the way back to the original concept, the original script, and the original concept art. Like I love movies that had an idea behind it; they weren't just kind of generated from nothing. Because there's so much craft and so much love that goes into these things.
Yeah, and like you say, like a lot of it is practical. Like I
Yeah,
don't know if they use. I mean, I think they'd use there's miniatures and stuff there too. But yeah, like a lot of those sets are just like real sets, you know. And it's like that old trick too. You can see where it's like they've obviously gotten like a hose or something and just sprayed these streets down. So you know you get like those reflections off the road. So like everything just looks gorgeous with the lighting, and it's. Yeah, it's understated how fantastic that film looks, especially like, you know, on Blu-ray and stuff, man. It still looks amazing.
oh yeah, absolutely. Movies that are shot more on film hold up really well. Like I still think Blade Runner. It's older than I am, and it's still one of the best looking movies ever made, in my opinion. Just those
Cool. Yeah.
miniatures where they built they actually built like I think it was like a 10 by 10 miniature city with like working lights and stuff like that. Like they did everything, but they tried to do the fire with real life like pyrotechnics, but that was the one thing they couldn't do. They did a what they call a composite, where they took footage of fire and kind of put added on in post. But all the lights and all the buildings and everything, those are all physical miniatures in Blade Runner, and that makes the movie hold
Yeah.
up so much better than if they try to do
Yeah.
something else.
He seemed to be pretty good at using like little miniatures and those kind of effects. 'Cause I know there was that scene in Alien when, you know, you had the shot of the whole sort of the bone ship or whatever, and I think the story was what they had like little kids in the spacesuits to
Yeah.
make it look even bigger. Like stuff like that. Like it's just such a cool sort of cheat to get around making the stuff look more grandiose. But hey, man, like it still stands up, and that's all that matters.
Yeah, quite often like budget limitations come up with the best solutions. Like I remember I was really impressed with the effect that they did in the original, I want to say the original what do you call it? Nightmare on Elm Street, where
Mhm.
they wanted to do a shot where somebody is like on the ceiling, and
Oh, well, yeah, I know what you mean.
yeah,
Yeah.
and their best solution for it was to make a house set, attach somebody uh attach somebody to the roof, flip it upside down, and so the camera shot is from somebody on the ceiling, which looks like the floor, looking up at somebody that's actually on the floor that looks like the ceiling. But it's shot in a
Yeah.
way where it looks like somebody's like freaking out and flipping around all over the ceiling, and you're like, it's such a weird visual that it kind of makes it creepier. Like that movie hasn't aged
Yeah.
perfectly, but that shot was really interesting because it really messes with your head because you shouldn't be able to
Plus,
do
I
that.
think I think the whole set was on like a thing, right? That they could rotate the whole set as well, because she's like getting kind of like sucked up onto the roof at one point. She kind of like slides across it. I think, yeah, from memory, the whole thing was sort of on a what do you call it, like a big rig that kind of spun it
Yeah,
around as well. Like the
like
camera's locked off. Yeah,
kind of like a big gyroscope or whatever. They can just kind of rotate it around and
yeah,
yeah, I think you're right about that. That was a Craven, Wes Craven. Was that Wes Craven? I
yeah,
think.
yeah.
Yeah,
There's some great shots in that, man. Like stuff
yeah,
that's still like super creepy. Um, like that, you know, just because again, like it's all shot on film and a lot of it's practical, but yet like great lighting, just great composition, and it still looks really sort of unsettling. One of my favorite shots is like a shot in, I think it's like Nightmare on Elm Street 4, which isn't a great movie from memory, but there's like a really cool shot of like I think one of the characters is going through like Freddy's world or something, and there's a shot of like all these kids that are on like meat hooks or something, or they were all like suspended on chains, and it's like really creepy. And from memory, I want to say that it was like a real shot, like it wasn't fake, but I remember that having some really cool looking shots too. Something about the '80s and horror films, man. They just seemed to put more effort into it back then.
Yeah, especially movies that had the kind of really creative special effects guys. Like I forget his name, the Italian guy who did all the zombie movies. Can't remember.
Not Tom Savini. I mean the director.
Oh yeah, yeah, Savini. Yeah, yeah, Savini. Yeah, he's done a
Yeah.
lot of horror movies, and they come up with some really really creative ways to do those visuals sometimes. But yeah, like another scene, it was such a cheap solution. But another scene, I think in the original Nightmare on Elm Street, they have like a scene where the main girl, she goes to sleep, I think, and then
Oh, the
they,
hair
they,
comes to the wall. Yeah.
yeah, they just have like a sheet for the wall, and then you just see some hand imprints go through it, and it's like the cheapest effect in the world, but it works really well. I remember
Yeah.
when they redid the movie a few years ago and did that in CG, it wasn't nearly as effective to me. I don't know, just something
Yeah.
about seeing something that we still haven't quite nailed that in some cases, especially in motion. Like we'll get into this later, but they kind of showed off how much graphics tech has improved with the Unreal 5 Matrix demo. I didn't play it, but I watched some clips from it, and it's really good looking, especially in stills where they show like the real Keanu versus the CG Keanu. But as soon as it's in motion, you have no question it's not right. So I don't know when they'll
Yeah,
get that right.
it's that uncanny valley thing. Yeah, but if you
Yeah,
find a way to cheat it realistically, it's way more convincing, and that's kind of tricks your eye a bit better.
yeah, for sure. Cool. Did you have anything else to mention on the Dark City, or pretty much?
Um, no, not really. Yeah, I mean, unless just to say anyone who's people listening, just watch the movie if you haven't seen it because it's amazing, and try and watch the director's cut so you don't. Well, I suppose we spoiled it now, but
Yeah, we kind of
yeah,
spoiled
just
it.
try and watch. Just, yeah, director's cut. Just yeah, I think is kind of the way to go. Universally, that seems to be the sentiment.
Yeah, yeah. The minor things the minor editing, pacing that you lost, and the director's cut is definitely worth it considering the intro. But yeah, we've kind of already spoiled it now. But I will say
But it
that
is, yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
no, I was just going to mention that a lot of people, it's kind of been propagated on the internet that Matrix ripped off Dark City. That's not really true. If you want a well well scripted breakdown, it's my last video, Cyberpunk Part 3. But interesting parallels between the films is that Andrew Mason was a producer on Dark City. He also worked with the director on The Crow as well. He, people aren't bound by contracts to not work on other films. He's obviously looking for more work. Warner Brothers dictated to the Wachowskis that to save money on the Matrix, that they should go to Australia because they had a partnership, I think, with Roadshow at the time, so that they were able to basically save a lot of money by shooting in Australia because Australia is way cheaper than California at the time,
Yeah.
at least. And so that was the solution for it. And what happened is that Andrew Mason, Australian producer who had worked with the director of Dark City, he's like, "Hey, come to Sydney. There's some great shots and some sets that you could use for your film. You save a ton of money and you get the great production value." And so that's literally what happened. They saw some of these streets and some of these buildings, like I think the iconic black and white checkered floor that you see in Dark City, the kind of the spiral staircase. You also see that a little bit in the Matrix. The rooftops where Murdoch is running away from just the city in general while it's morphing and moving up and down, as well as the strangers. That's also seen in the beginning of the Matrix with Trinity, and that's perfectly fine. People reuse sets and props all the time. But funnily enough, there was a connection in that the Andrew Mason did end up working on the Matrix, and I watched an interview later on, and Alex Proyas is pretty salty about the Matrix. He feels that the producer basically ripped him off, and then they stole everything and made the Matrix. But long story short, the timeline doesn't work out. Like if you can actually go back and find all the scripts of the Matrix, and all the basic plot points were in there as far back as far back as 1996. So like nothing changed since 1996 as far as the basic plot was concerned. There was just an overlap in shooting locations, and one of the producers that worked on Dark City convinced the Wachowskis to come shoot there in Sydney, and that's like the only connection really. physical connection is that they shot on a couple sets, and the same producer, one of the same producers. So
Yeah.
kind of a little bit of history, but a lot of people claim that Matrix completely stole the Dark City, but they're both well into production by the time each came out. So
Yeah, I mean, I've never really heard that said too much, to be honest. Like, I can see how obviously you've got the connection there with like the cinematography to some extent is pretty similar with like the lighting and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I've never really made that sort of connection to it. Yeah, like just not that blatant in the terms of saying, oh, they kind of stole from the other kind of thing. Um, but yeah, I always thought it was sort of like it's like a Leo DiCaprio moment, where you see the same set. It's like, hey, that's the same set again. Like it's just like a fun little thing to see it being reused. I never looked at it in the sense of like, oh, they've stolen that set from Dark City, because they're both great films and kind of stand on their own 2 feet, doing their own thing. So yeah, I don't
yeah,
think one detracts from the other. Yeah.
they were just on a really really tight budget for what they were going for. Like making the Matrix for 40 million. That was a stretch. That's a lot of really groundbreaking special effects. CG was still fairly early, so they tried to do a lot of things practically. So yeah, in a lot of ways, they had to really cut corners when they could, and the corners that they cut were done in smart ways, and that there were sets that fit perfectly. Like the rooftop scene, for example, they had a fully enclosed rooftop set that was built for the Dark City movie because they needed to move those buildings up and down while the strangers were modifying the city. So that set already existed, so they just used that for the initial Agent Trinity chase. Perfect, worked out great. But yeah, I don't think there was any intention of the Wachowskis to rip off Dark City. They saw it. They saw an early showing in like December 1997, I think. But they literally went. They had their shooting script in the next March. So like in 3 months, they were already like trained up, ready to go. So the timing doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Just for the people who I try to dispel that in my video as well, but people have really overstate the influence between one movie and the next. Like the most they would have done is that they might have seen a couple cool shots and a couple cool angles from Dark City, instead of maybe some
Yeah.
stylistic influences that could have happened for sure. But yeah, if you look back, the scripts go years before. They actually did a 500-page comic book style storyboard for the Matrix back in like 1996. A year or two
Yeah,
before. Yeah.
I remember the story being that like when they worked on that movie before they worked on the Matrix, Bound, I think it was called, which I haven't seen, to
Yeah.
be honest, but yeah, I remember the story was there that they wanted to make the Matrix when they made Bound, like that's sort of where their heads were at. So
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, like it's not even really a connection there. It's just like you say, people saying, oh, oh, this was copying this when it's really not founded in anything. I don't think.
Yeah, they went from like a low budget, like $3 million movie Bound to a $40 million sci-fi film. That was a hard sell. Like
Mm.
they had to really push to get that to happen. So it's kind of amazing that it did happen. But I guess with that, we should probably pivot over to the Matrix. So I hated the Matrix. I don't like it at all. No, joking.
All right, let's end the stream right now then.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's switch over to make some photos. So yeah, we've already kind of gone over our introductions to it. We saw it both in theaters, loved it. You kind of got a mostly blind first watch too. You didn't know what it was about, right?
Totally blind, totally blind.
Yeah, that's the best way to watch it. Unfortunately, I feel really bad for people because honestly, you're not going to get that experience today. You're going to get it spoiled either through memes or references or something before you watch it for the first time, which I feel really bad about. Like, imagine not being able to watch Jurassic Park or The Matrix or any of these kind of really classic films for the first time without having something spoiled. It's got to be a real shame, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's honestly up there with one of the sort of the best movie twists of all time, along with, I guess, like I mentioned before, the Empire Strikes Back thing's probably the greatest film twist of all time, I would argue. But yeah, the Matrix, man, it's up there. All of
Yeah.
this is to turn humans into this, to batteries. Like that whole scene is just like mind blowing. And it sounds like we sound like old boomers saying it, but yeah, just kids these days, kids these days, like they're just you're just not going to get that cinema experience. I don't think it's jaded to say that, but it's just true. You just don't get that anymore. You don't.
No, and it isn't even just like oh, they don't know what they're talking about, these kids. I'm just saying, like, I feel bad because the world won't let them experience this blind. I don't think that anybody born since the Matrix film one came out can really avoid all the internet content about this movie. It's so pervasive throughout our culture. Like it's gotten so pervasive that our shorthand term for our world is not real is the Matrix. We're living in the Matrix. You know, that's
Mm.
become like uh, it's become our shorthand term for it. Kind of like how people in America at least call bandages band-aids. You know, the brand has kind of outshone the generic term. So it's kind of
Yeah.
insane how pervasive it's gotten into our community, and it's also been like parodied. And I think I looked at IMDb, almost like 1,000 different shows and movies have referenced
Uh,
or parodied the Matrix. So you see it everywhere now. It's kind of crazy how insanely culturally popular it's become. But yeah, getting that blind experience first time, it's like such a amazing cinematic moment. One of my favorite times of the movie is actually because you have no idea what's happening next. You're just 100% engaged, and you can't get enough. You know?
yeah, well, and it's one of those movies where it like the first one specifically doesn't feel like it wastes any frames. It feels like every scene is kind of getting you to the next scene. Like there's never wasted time. I mean, the bit kind of obviously before the final sort of shootout and action stuff is sort of it's not much is happening, but still kind of getting you to the next spot. Whereas not jumping ahead obviously too far, but yeah, like the sequels, like Reload and Revolutions, just felt like they had shit in that, where it was just like, where are we going with this? Like you got like a 5 minute long orgy scene for a bunch of people that dancing in a cave, and it's like, what purpose does this serve? Whereas I felt like that first film was kind of like perfect, where it's every frame is being used for something. Never feels like it's wasted time.
Yeah, that's echoes my sentiments perfectly. I think it's possibly the best paced film I've ever seen. Like I can't think of another film that I would never like. Even my favorite films. There's parts of Blade Runner I don't really love. Like there's a couple shots in
Mm.
there I'm like I could cut that. You probably wouldn't lose much. But in the Matrix, I think every single shot has some sort of meaning. Like maybe the shot that where they cut to the two people washing the window is unnecessary. It was a director's cameo. Maybe that was overindulgent. It's done in 10 frames. But yeah, I agree. This movie is so tight. It's actually I showed the clip in my last video where the director, or sorry, the editor said that his last pass through the movie while editing, he shaved off 2 frames out of the entire film because
Yeah.
like a special effect had come in and it wasn't quite the same momentum as he thought it would be when he saw like kind of a pre-visualization. So he shaved off 2 frames out of a 2.5 hour movie. That's insane. That's insane how tight that movie is. And unlike a lot of films that are also great, we've never gotten a director's cut. We've never needed one really. It's just been a really exceptionally paced film. I think I rewatched it, and I think that my biggest criticism on pacing was there was one scene where Neo was reaching toward a door, and I would have extended that scene by like maybe a second. But otherwise, I think it's like a perfectly paced film. There's just the right breathing room, just the right amount of action. Never gets too long, never gets too tired of action. Just as soon as things start to get a little, like even maybe getting a tiny bit stale, it cuts to something new, and it's just like a rhythmic editing, which is really impressive stuff.
Yeah, and it is like you say, like the whole thing's over. You start watching it and it's already over because you're just constantly getting to that next scene. So, it's funny that you talk about like a director's cut because yeah, like it's just one of those kind of films that it's never really been touched again. It just kind of keeps coming out in different formats, but yeah, it's kind of widely agreed that there's not really anything that needed to be added or taken away from it. I don't even think there's any like deleted scenes that they've ever shown, have they? Like it's just this is the movie they wanted to make, which kind of says a lot about its quality when you look at the what came after it with those sequels.
Yeah, no, it's kind of insane. I think it probably has to do like this is actually very parallel to another movie we both love a lot, Mad Max Fury Road. Similarly, I can't blanked out on his name. The George Miller. That was his name, right? When he was
Yeah.
creating, when he like, because there's a huge gap between Thunderdome and and Fury Road, obviously like 20, 30 years.
Mm,
He had been drafting. He'd been working on the script and the screenplay and the storyboards for Fury Road since like the early '90s. and it
Yeah,
came
like
out.
decades, literally. Yeah.
Yeah, so like it came out in like I think 2015, I think it was. So
Hmm.
he'd been thinking and crunching on that story and tightening it up and revisiting angles and shots and storyboards for something like 20, 25 years. So
Yeah. The
there's
funny
a
thing about that too, it's a testament to how you can make like essentially a 2 hour long car chase somehow still be interesting like the whole time. That's another great film as well. Like the way that kind of thing's like it's probably not as like tight as obviously the Matrix is, but yeah, like in terms of just raw entertainment and just like sitting there and watching 2 hours of your life go by, that's pretty well done, you know.
yeah, no, and you could tell like that was a crazy shoot. They did like 8 months in Namibia or something like that. Like that was an insane shoot for Fury Road. But I saw this clip. It's great. The guy who plays the big bad Immortan Joe.
Yeah, Morton Joe.
Yeah, I guess he's kind of a famous actor, or at least he was. He passed away, unfortunately. But he was kind of a famous actor in Australia. Had you heard of him outside of Mad
Uh,
Max?
No, not really. I mean, he's in the first movie. That's literally the only other time I think I've ever seen him in a movie. So
Okay.
he wasn't, yeah, he wasn't huge in Australia. But I mean, I would argue his character in the first one wasn't like that memorable. I mean, he was a good villain, but it's not like you're not putting that dude up there with the greatest cinematic villains of all time. But a Morton Joe, on the other hand, is like, yeah, that dude was memorable as fuck, as far as movie bad guys go. And the way he dies is
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
It's like
He's
one of
like
the best movie deaths of all time,
it was great. Yeah. I mean, again, we need to do it. We need to follow this up sometime with Mad Max because there's tons of Mad Max to talk about. But
Yeah.
I just remember one direct behind the scenes shot of Fury Road, and again, it was like 8 months in like Africa or something like that where they shot this. They shot a little bit in Australia. I think mostly it was
Yeah.
Namibia, I think. But there's one shot where they're probably all tired. They've probably all been doing all these crazy stunts, practical stunts, swinging off of moving trucks and stuff for months now. But one shot is the actor for Moten Joe walking down and talking to a bunch of like extras and stunt people
Yeah.
on this big contraption on a truck, and he's like, "You all look amazing, amazing!" And everybody's like doing the V8 symbol and like shouting back at him, and they're like, you could tell they were just absolutely having a blast. They wouldn't miss this for the world, and I just love that sort of uh, love of the craft. They aren't just phoning it in. They love this world, this whole universe, this whole work of art that they are putting together. I just love that attitude, and I kind of see that a little bit in the Matrix behind the scenes too. Like you can tell they're tired. They've been like, to put it in perspective, for the Matrix, for example, they had about 4 months of hardcore training with Yun Yu Ping, right, to learn how to
Yep.
actually look like they can fight, because none of these guys had any sort of martial arts history. Um, and unfortunately, first day of training, Keanu Reeves walks into the training with a neck brace on. He had just gotten into a really bad accident. So, and Carrie Ann Moss, she like broke her foot or something. Hugo Weaving got a hip polyp he had to get removed. Everybody got like injured and bruised and messed up, and it's like, but they were having an absolute blast. Like, I think it was Carrie Ann Moss. She was like, she didn't complain about her foot being broken or her injury because she didn't want to lose her job, because she really wanted to work on this movie. So like, really like troopers, and absolutely really wanting to make this as the best movie they could.
Yeah, there's like a really funny behind the scenes shot I remember seeing. I don't remember where I saw it, but it was a take where they were filming something with like the scene when Neo's fighting Smith, and they're all, it's like they're shooting Keanu and they all look like just destroyed, like they're obviously really tired out. And then Keanu realizes like that the behind the scenes people are filming him, so he like kind of playfully goes up to the camera and starts like shadow boxing it, and he just does this like roundhouse kick as well at the end of it. But it just like shows like the dude is obviously like that. They would have done a bazillion takes to get that scene together, but as soon as there's like something fun going on, you know what I mean? Like he's instantly like, "Oh, that's fun. Let me just mess around with the behind the scenes guy." Like that kind of shows like the vibe of that film, which is funny because of how serious and how like kind of crazy the tone of it is with the stakes of everything that's happening. But then those guys, like you say, man, they had an absolute blast making it, and that's what kind of carries across into the final product.
Absolutely. Yeah, they really had a lot of camaraderie, a lot of like they're absolute troopers. That must have been a hard shoot, especially with like the brand new sort of special effects shots, like with the whole camera setup where they had something like 40 or 50 cameras all placed in a row to get those bullet time shots where they had the camera moves so quickly that they actually had to shoot with like dozens and dozens of cameras in sequence, like still cameras, to get
Yeah.
enough frames to get a rotation quickly. Like I heard an early attempt was they were going to try to put a video camera on a rocket, on like on like almost like a rails rocket, and then just kind of like zoom around. But that was obviously too blurry and too messy. But yeah, no, it was stuff that never been shot before, never been done before that they figured out. So yeah, I'm sure it took a lot of patience, a lot of really tough work. But I mean,
Plus to just have faith in the directors, because like you say, like no one had ever done those effects before. And I think I seem to remember the same thing about Fury Road again, where Tom Hardy was saying that when he was on the set and George Miller was telling him things to do, that he was just like basically adamant with the director, like, dude, like what the hell are you doing? This is not going to work. And then it obviously he said he saw the final product and he instantly regretted ever arguing with George over those kind of things.
yeah,
And it would have been the same thing with the Matrix. Like, okay, so what you're going to do here is you're just going to like lean backwards on your knees as this guy shoots at you, and you'd be like, "What?" It's like, yeah, and then this camera's going to fly around you. You'd just be like, "What the hell are you talking about?" You know,
yeah.
there's no basis of what that's going to look like. Just like, just trust me, it'll work. You know.
Yeah, and Keanu had already been in movies for like 10, 15 years at that point, so he was already pretty experienced. And these newbies start telling him what to do. It's like, yeah, it would probably be they had to probably place a lot of faith in the Wachowskis that they knew what they're doing, and as crazy as it was, they kind of stumbled into what I think is like action movie masterpiece. I think it's one of the best action movies that has been done ever. So I think that they did a really good job with it. But yeah, especially the creativity of how things were shot. Like it's very much like a lot of the shots also mimic the concept art that they had done back in 1996. So like they had obviously thought about these angles specifically, like at the beginning where you see Agent Smith look up the window and see. I think he looks up to see Trinity running, and like those were all very deliberate. Yeah, very deliberate angles, and very all these sort of moves weren't just, hey, wouldn't it be cool? Like these were really well figured out and thought out. And I think the kind of unsung hero with a lot of this stuff. I don't know all the things he did, but I have a feeling he probably did a lot of it. Was we both mentioned producer. I can't believe I
Joel
completely.
Silver.
Joel
Yeah.
Silver. There you go.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I'd always remember seeing his name pop up in all like 90s action movies, like Lethal Weapon, obviously The Matrix.
I think he did Predator. Yeah, Predator as well.
Predator,
Yeah.
Die Hard. Some
Yep.
of these are 80s, obviously. And there was another really good one, Demolition Man, which I actually really like. He was in that
I
too.
want to say, I think he was Commando as well. I want to say it was
He
Commando.
did. He did.
Am I
Yeah, he
wrong?
was
Yeah.
one of them. Yeah.
Commando's amazing. I would fight anyone who disagrees with how good Commando is.
So yeah, no, it's really cool how many movies he's been part of. But I think he has a lot of he's obviously has a lot of action movie experience. So I think that he was able to kind of bring that to the table in terms of somebody said we got cut off. Hopefully that's not the case. My stream's still
Yeah,
up.
I think I dropped out for a sec there. I think just a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Looks like we're
You're
still
back
live.
now, though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, he just has a really kind of solid action movie experience, which I think helped kind of fill that gap that the Wachowskis were obviously big anime action movie fans, but they didn't really have a ton of experience yet in the action movie things. Like they'd just done Bound, that was it basically. So I think that having some experienced Hollywood types kind of make the production as big and as professional as possible, I think that really helped. And I think that kind of also showed a bit of a difference between the first movie and the sequels, because this movie made tons of money, like $400 million from like a new franchise, which is crazy, especially for the time. But yeah, as we got into the sequels, I think that the Hollywood studio pressure was kind of lessened a bit, because these two had made such a successful movie that they obviously know what they're doing, right? I think that was the attitude. I think.
Yeah, I think the first movie definitely would have. I think I was chatting about that on Twitter a while back, but yeah, it's like the first movie definitely to me has like it's creative, but you can tell there was like they pulled the reins back on it on certain things.
Yeah.
And then you go into those sequels, and it's just obvious that the Wachowskis were like, yeah, here you go, here's a blank check, whatever you guys want to do at this point, because you've obviously proven you can, create gold no matter what you're doing. And then, yeah, we ended up with what came after that. And I don't think all of it's bad, but it
No.
is definitely like you needed someone there to say, can we just like scale this back a bit, or maybe we should get rid of this? And it reminds me a lot of the not the Matrix, the Star Wars movies.
Yeah.
Like when you had the prequels, and it would have been the same thing with George Lucas, that because they just would have said, sure, just whatever you want to create, this is your story at this point. And it just was very obvious that no one was there to kind of like challenge them on certain things.
Yeah.
And yeah, like yeah, that's why I think that first film just feels so focused. And Joel Silver would have known, like he's up, the dude's producing it. He would have told them to get rid of certain things.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, and I think that like filtered creativity ends up being the best because I know from my experience, I know you're a professional video editor, not just on YouTube but also elsewhere. I've done graphic design for 16 years. We both have jobs where we have to get revisions or direction or some sort of uh, compromise between what our initial idea was and what the final product was. But I find that good direction and good criticism can make something so much better. Like my original idea is not perfect, and I'll be the first one to admit that. It might be exactly what I thought it would be, and I might have spent hours and hours and hours doing it, but somebody might bring up something and be like, oh, I didn't think about that. I should think about that. And so same thing with, I think George Lucas. George Lucas obviously was incredible.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, because I mean, the stories are is that, and like they're saying how A New Hope was originally like a disaster. Like some of the original ideas in it were just dreadful. But it had people coming back, and I think it got fixed with editing and stuff like that. So who's to say that the original Star Wars, if George Lucas had have created what he wanted to create, would have just been nothing. Like would just been a complete mess. So there's definitely truth in that. In listening to your peers and kind of taking constructive criticism about certain plot elements. Definitely. And there was definitely none of that for that fourth Matrix film. I can tell you that. That's just obvious. They went
yeah.
in there and just said, here's the script for my fourth film. This is what I'm making, and that's what's up on the screen, which is why it's a pile of shit.
Yeah, I agree with you. And there's like a kind of like an open secret in Hollywood that if you've made a big hit in the past, you basically have a career forever. That's why people like M. Night Shyamalan still get movies somehow because he's made a couple really big hits, a couple really, really good movies, but he hasn't made a good one for a long time. But,
Yeah.
I'd actually say Split was pretty decent, but yeah, most of his other stuff was pretty bad. But yeah, it's kind of weird. Like when you start out, Bound wasn't a very big hit. It made its money back, but Matrix was a huge success. 10x its budget or whatever.
Yeah.
When you've done something like that, people tend to listen to you. They don't tell you what to do anymore. And I think that's kind of as we pivot into Matrix. Unless you had something else to mention, the Matrix. I mean, we could talk about how much we love about the movie, but it's pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, it's all been said. I do want to say, like, I think it definitely. I mean, it's probably been touched on anyway, but yeah, the effect it just had on pop culture, like, I don't know if you can really overstate just how massive it was. Like you kind of touched on it briefly, but just like how every movie and every like thing that came out after that just like tried to rip it off. Remember there was like the Charlie's Angels movie?
Yeah.
And there was like a behind the scenes thing and the director was like, yeah, man, like, I was watching The Matrix when we wrote this. And you watch that movie, it's just like that Charlie's Angels movie would never have existed without The Matrix. You know what I mean? Like it just, you could tell that just influenced so much of that film, obviously. And there's like Scary Movie. There's like a scene in Scary Movie where she does like the Trinity kick and little things like that popping up in films. It was kind of ranged from being kind of funny to just being obnoxious.
Yeah, it happened really fast too. The same year Matrix came out, there was a Matrix parody in Deuce Bigelow.
God, I don't ever remember that.
That Rob Schneider, where he like dodges stuff. Does the same like the Neo move, or dodging like knives and stuff from the Gigolo guy he was covering for.
Yeah.
But
right.
And then like a year or two later, Shrek, parodied it. Yeah, Scary Movie.
Yeah, when the one in Scary Movie was particularly cringy from memory. It was just dreadful. I actually really like Scary Movie. I'm not heaping on that film because I think it's actually really funny. But it's like a really poorly done effect. Like it's the Trinity kick, but just done dreadfully. Then it's just kind of like, oh, guys, like, come on.
Yeah, it's like when people like hold frame, but physically
rotate
they don't
the camera. Yeah,
rotate the camera and then move. But yeah,
Yeah.
no, yeah. As you can see with the behind the scenes footage on screen right now, there was an incredible amount of production that went into getting that effect. Like those became almost like entire scenes themselves just to get that one camera rotation effect.
Mm.
Yeah, like I read up on it. Basically, they have this whole ring of cameras that they shoot in a program them to shoot one after another, so that they can rotate the camera much faster than they could ever do that physically, and on a green screen. And then they basically in post recreate the entire scene that they were in CG, and so that's the background's all CG, and then they use
Yeah.
computer interpolation to merge the frames because not even with all those cameras, it's not quite enough frames. It doesn't have enough motion blur or whatever. So they use
Yeah.
interpolation to merge all those frames. So it's like a huge production whenever they do one of those effects, and it's just like for a couple seconds. But I remember distinctly the first time going into Matrix blind and seeing Trinity do that kick. I'm like, what the hell am I watching, and how do I watch more of it? You know, like just
Yeah.
just mind blowing. Like mind blowing special effects is the best way I could put it. Just you have no idea that could even be done. You know.
The coolest thing I like and it's a shame that they never really played on it more, but that one other agent, that opening scene's a badass, and he just
Yeah.
never does anything for the rest of the film. He has that super cool leap across the thing, and you're like, damn, this dude's hardcore, but then he literally does nothing for the rest of the movie. It's all Smith from that point on. But yeah, just that setup of like, okay, well, this chick's superhuman, but then suddenly, hang on, this guy can do the same thing. What's going on? You know? Like that's part of the mystery of like what the hell is happening in this film, you know?
Yeah, and that opening was great, and it's a testament to again making a solid action film. I could see many of the films kind of starting out slow. This film gets you into it without revealing too much. Like it gets you really invested in the action, the movie, the setting, without revealing very much at all. And that's like a great opening, in that you can get people excited, you get the tensions up, and then you can kind of get into the more somber Neo Thomas Anderson stuff. But
Yeah.
I just had to point out a commenter, Meister Dejv, said Commando has best one-liners. I don't know if you know, but I think G-Man is like probably the biggest Commando fan that I know of, at
I'm a big
least.
Commando fan, yeah. Yeah. It was one of those movies that when I got it on DVD, like when DVDs were first a thing, going back again, and like I think I just had it on loop constantly at my house. I was just always watching Commando.
Yeah, yeah. No,
Yeah.
I don't remember all of them, but I do remember. Was it Let Off Some Steam when he like sticks them
Let
up
up
the?
some steam,
Yeah.
Bennett. And actually the guy plays Bennett was out of Mad Max 2. He's like one of the punks in Mad Max 2
Oh, I
with the
didn't know that.
mohawk. Yeah.
That's
The
funny.
guy's literally done nothing but, as far as I can remember, play Bennett and then play the Mohawk dude in Mad Max 2. Yeah, there's some great scenes in that movie, man. The fact too that they think that guy could physically take on Arnie is hilarious.
Yeah, because
He's just like this tall, pudgy dude, and Arnie's super ripped. It's like, man, come on. There's no way that's a fair fight.
well, you got to take into account that he's wearing chainmail, so his armor was much higher.
Yeah, what was with the chainmail? It was very odd,
No
wasn't it?
idea.
Yeah. Was it a fashion choice or was it strategic? We'll never know.
Maybe he like kind of stumbled off the set of Mad Max and just kind of like into the set and like, oh, he's already wearing chainmail. I guess he could keep it on.
He just kept his outfit on when he was in the behind the scenes stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, no, Matrix is a huge game changer, and a lot of people kind of have come to kind of hate the Matrix for some reason. I don't really get why, but I think it's kind of retrospective because people have mixed feelings and sometimes really bad feelings about the sequels, and also the Matrix did unfortunately inspire a ton of other movies to rip it off poorly. And
Mm.
my argument to that is like, okay, blame the copycats, not the original film. But
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it was more like I don't really remember massive rip-offs, but it was more just like the small things where you were like, yeah, that's just like a Matrix copy. Like it was shots in just various action films that were just very clearly ripping off the Matrix, and that's understandable. But remember there was that point too when it just seemed like so many games seemed to have slow motion things as well. Like obviously it got done well more than it got done poorly in video games, but like the whole argument about Max Payne and sort of who came first with that whole concept. I think the guys who created Max Payne were pretty adamant that like, oh no, we had this idea, well before the Matrix was out, and there's a lot of cool discussions to be had around that. But yeah, like it gaming profited from it pretty well, man. I think like, we got some awesome sort of titles off the back of that probably would have never come out if the Matrix never existed.
yeah, I remember Max Payne had a long development time. They came out obviously about 2 years after the Matrix, but I don't doubt that they had sort of a John Woo inspired action mechanic in development, or even at least in conceptual phase by then. So I don't think
Yeah.
that they necessarily ripped off the Matrix, but I could definitely see that the Matrix helped popularize those games. I don't think that Max Payne would have had the level of reception it did unless people were already hyped about bullet time and that sort of idea. So
Yeah.
I think that definitely helped. And to be fair, like I think it was one of the first games to do bullet time, or at least do it well. And I love that mechanic in Max Payne. I would just completely. I remember one of the first, I think possibly the first time I ever modded a game was I took Max Payne, and there was a mod that you could after playing it legit the first time, I went back and installed a mod which gave you unlimited bullet time, and whenever you went into bullet time, immediately the song "Smack My Bitch Up" by Prodigy would start playing.
Yeah, yeah.
And so
Sounds about right. Yeah.
yeah, so like the Prodigy connection with Matrix and everything, like yeah, like it was a great, just like kind of like my Matrix simulator for a few years, because I really wanted a game based on the universe, until we got them. No.
There was so many of those mods where it just added in like someone's favorite song to like the bullet time. I always remember that was like one of the most common mods. It was like,
Yeah.
yeah, some
Yeah,
cheesy techno song that just didn't really work with the context of the game, but someone's like, yeah, check out my mod for, Max Payne.
yeah, I want to say it was either Max Payne or some other game similar to that, which had a I'm trying to remember which game it was. It felt like Max Payne, so I keep on thinking it was Max Payne. But there was a mod where you had multiplayer, and whenever somebody triggered bullet time in that zone, everyone would go into bullet time, but not
Oh,
in the.
yeah, that's the specialist, I think maybe. That's a Half-Life mod.
Oh
I'm pretty
yeah,
sure I
you're
think I
probably
know what you're
right.
talking about. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. No one was near you, but you just only go into bullet time because it had to do it for fairness so people couldn't, shoot you in the back or something.
yeah, but it was cool because it was contextual. So like if you were in another part of the map, it wouldn't affect everywhere else. So they could be
Yeah.
going around in real time, but only the people who are doing the bullet time would be in bullet time. And I remember that being the coolest idea. I don't know
Yeah.
if it was very good gameplay wise, but it was really fun.
Yeah, I want to say it's the specialist. I think it's a Half-Life mod. I think that's what you're talking about.
That
But yeah,
sounds
that
right.
was
Yeah.
huge, man. When you went into like land centers, far out, they don't have land centers anymore these days. That's another topic of discussion. But like, yeah, we used to go into land centers back in the early 2000s, and that was just like everyone was playing that mod for Half-Life.
Yeah. Yeah. I can almost guarantee that you're correct. I just remember it playing kind of like Max Payne. So
It was super janky though, but that was
yeah.
part of why it was fun. Like it was pretty jank. But yeah,
Yeah,
good
it was
times.
super jank. Yeah, I doubt that they modded in multiplayer into Max Payne. That would have been kind of a big deal. Uh,
Someone modded Max Payne into Half-Life now, so it replaces Gordon Freeman with Max Payne, and you can like play. You still play through the whole game as normal, but it's just like Max Payne's weapons, and Max Payne does like voiceovers throughout the game and stuff. It's actually really good.
That's pretty good.
Yeah,
So yeah, and then so like Matrix was a ridiculous hit, and so everybody wanted more. And kind of the funny stories about this is that, according to the Wachowskis and pretty reliable interviews, that they said that, I can't find any evidence of it, but they said that originally they did conceive of the Matrix as a trilogy. But the funny thing is, this is super funny from a 2021 perspective. But they were told by the studio, "Oh no, don't make any sequels. Make one really good film."
yeah,
So they actually they plan to do kind of the one Neo sort of plot over 3 movies, but then cut it and condense it down to one movie, and ended up being great. But that probably kind of bit them in the ass down the road, because now you have a god. How do you follow that up? So how do you follow up the
Mm,
one? So I think that kind of was one of the biggest challenges for the sequels, is because they kind of already had him complete his journey already. So how do you continue that? And so I can see that it was a tricky writing issue that when coming into the Matrix Reloaded, which came out in I think 2003,
yeah,
because that was a really ambitious. They went from one tight movie to
two back to
two
back. Yeah,
two movies the same year,
plus the
and
anime.
the
Yeah,
the anime. What do you call that?
Animatrix.
Yeah, yeah, but like it's called was it a
Oh,
anthology or something like that? Is that what they call? Kind of like a bunch of different
um,
stories in one.
it's transmedia storytelling, I think is what it's called. I only know that because that's I studied it at uni, and that was like the one example that they used was the Matrix, because it also had the video game, because it's like all the different stories, but they
Yeah.
all link together. Yeah, I think that's what it's called.
Yeah, it's definitely transmedia franchise. That's for sure. That's correct.
Yeah.
I thought the Animatrix in particular was a anthology, but I could be
Oh yeah, I
wrong.
guess it is. Yeah, anthology or
It's
something.
like a
Yeah.
bunch of small stories in one, and I personally liked the Animatrix quite a bit. It did one thing I wasn't super into, which was basically it essentially removed any mystery from the setting. You kind of knew what was happening, like because it went back and like filled in the gaps. Like in the
Like how the
first
war happened. Yeah.
yeah, in the
Yeah.
first movie, it's like you think it's 1999 when it's actually closer to 2199. I think that's the line, and it's like
Yeah.
we'd love to tell you what time it is, but we honestly don't know. Like that's how
It's
little
like,
they knew
yeah,
about the
now we
history.
know. Here's exactly what year it is. Blah blah blah. Yeah, and here's exactly what happened.
Yeah, yeah, unfortunately. So yeah, there's a little bit of that, which is uh, a little bit disappointing because some of the mystery of the first film was removed. But otherwise, they what was super cool about the Animatrix is what I love about it so much is that all these anime creators they were inspired by, like Ghost in the Shell and things like that. Even that weird MTV series, Eon Flux.
Neon Flux. Yeah.
Yeah, they brought
Yeah.
all these creators in to make Matrix content. So each
Yeah. Peter
story
Chung,
will,
I think, is the animator too. Yeah, and
yeah,
that's it's and yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
yeah, Peter Chung, yeah. And it's really awesome that they did that. It's kind of like giving back to them after borrowing ideas and style from them from previous media. So I thought it was a really cool moment in time because that had never really been done before.
Yeah, I mean, I think just to touch on what you said before, I think it does ruin the mystery behind it, but I think it kind of works in that sense because it is a side piece. Like it's if they did that in like say Matrix Reloaded started with like that whole thing of like and this is what happened before, the war and it showed all those scenes, I'd probably have an issue with it, but I think it's just like hey, it's like this side thing that is like a cool anime if you want to watch it and find it. So I think it kind of works on that level. I think the stories that don't really have anything to do with the Matrix universe specifically were the ones I found a bit boring. Like there's like that one where the kids are going through like a glitched house or something like that. Like that was just pretty pointless from memory. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? But if the ones where it kind of like had a connection to kind of what was happening in the film, I think there's one of the shorts was like that kid who's like skateboarding to escape, and he's actually in the film. Like his character is like the kid or something in the actual
Yeah.
Matrix Reloaded. He shows up for like 5 seconds, but it's like you've watched Animatrix, you go and say, hey, that's the kid from that one 5 minute long short. Like that was kind of cool.
Yeah, I keep on wanting to call him Mouse, but that was the guy in the first film. But he basically plays that same character, the kind of young, upstart, excitable kind of character. But what's really weird was when you watch the Matrix Reloaded, you're like, who the hell is this? Because this is kind of the fault of transmedia, if not done perfectly, in that you instead of building on a foundation with all these other pieces, you kind of cut out parts of your main story and place it in other places. Like there were parts of the story of Matrix Reloaded which were in the video game Enter the
Into the
Matrix.
Matrix, yeah.
Yeah, like entire scenes, like live action scenes, were in other media. There were entire characters you're supposed to be familiar with that you wouldn't have not even known about had you not watched the Animatrix. And as good as Animatrix is, it's definitely more niche than the big Hollywood film. Like it appealed more to cartoon and anime fans than it did to the mainstream viewers. So I thought that was a mistake, in that you relied on these puzzle pieces from other media. So
Yeah, I mean, with the End of the Matrix stuff, I don't think you had to play Into the Matrix to get what was happening with those characters. I mean, like, there's the scene on the highway or freeway or whatever when Morpheus falls off his car and Jada Pinkett Smith catches him. It's like if you play the game, you like literally drive that car up to the back of the truck just before he falls. But it's like you don't really need to have played that to accept that that's what's going to happen. Because I mean, they show a scene I think in the film when she calls up their operator and he's like, oh, he's on the freeway, he needs your help. So for me, that was like the entire setup that you needed to get there. And again, like to go back to that character, the kid, it's like, yeah, he shows up in the movie. And if you've watched the Animatrix, you'll go, okay, well, that's that kid from that one short. But in the context of the film, it's just like this is a kid who you understand that he's someone that Neo's freed. So it's not like you need that deeper understanding of who the character is. It's really just to kind of, I don't know, reference how extensive they've kind of gone with the universe. So I never like viewed it in the sense of like you needed to digest all these various pieces. Whereas it's like you watch Star Wars, and Star Wars just has all these dumb plot points in it, and my mates who are into the expanded universe would say, "Oh, well, that's explained in this comic, and that's explained in this book." Like it got to that level. You know what I mean? Like on the flip side of it.
Yeah, I was shocked by how stupid some of the extended universe stuff in Star Wars was. Like, there's a clone of Luke called Luke, and I think there's like another clone called Luke with like extra U's. I'm
Oh
not even
wow, okay,
joking.
I
Like,
never even knew about that. Yeah,
really, really stupid stuff. So yeah, I agree with you that expanded universe can kind of go off the wall a bit. Like, and to be fair, like most of Ghost and Niobe's journey that is covered in the Enter the Matrix, because uh, honestly, like wasn't all that necessary to the
no
plot. Like we don't need to know how they take out that factory or the power plant or whatever it
power
was.
plant. Yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah,
like a whole game dedicated to taking out a power plant, basically. Yeah,
yeah. So like it wasn't. You're right. It isn't all that important, but it did definitely feel like we were missing something. If you go into Reloaded right after the Matrix without any of the additional the game or the Animatrix, it does feel like you're missing something a little bit. And like
yeah, yeah.
and like the point you said before, there's a lot of wasted time. And that's kind of a shock. Like when I was in theaters when I saw Matrix Reloaded, I was completely blind to any of its flaws. I was like, this is awesome. I'm seeing more Matrix. This is great. But like obviously almost 20 years of retrospect, you definitely see the cracks a lot more visibly when you rewatch it, you know.
Yeah, like I said, I think by the time we got to the orgy scene, the weird nightclub scene where Morpheus is like going Zion, it's like what is happening? And there's like all these tribal drums and stuff. It's just like slow mo shot of like 100 people getting it on, and I'm like this is not going well, you know. Um,
Yeah.
it doesn't help that the first big fight scene in the film, I think, is the Burly Brawl, you know, against Smith, and that starts off great, and then it just goes into CGI hellland. It's like, what the fuck is going on, you know? Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, no, I knew in the cinema, like me and my mate, I saw that with the same guy I saw the first movie with, and we basically were just like, what the fuck, you know, like kind of at the same time when you start getting really into that movie. That's not to say it's bad, but it's definitely from the get go, you can tell this is on a whole different scale to the first film. I mean, it has that whole shot of them going to Zion. It's like this massive wide shot, and you've got all like the mech suits running around, and there's all these council people and different factions that are controlling things. It's a different league, man, to that first film entirely.
Yeah, definitely more ambitious, kind of tried to build it out, but in a way, like I kind of liked the fact that Zion's entire backstory and lore was summed up in like a sentence or two by I think it was Tank or one of the other crew in the original film. It's like Zion, the last human city, the only one we have left. You know, it's inside the Earth's core because it's the only place that's warm enough. Like that's all
Yeah,
you
that's all you
needed.
need. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. That's all you need. No more.
yeah,
Done. That's it. Then he's like, "How do you get there?" He's like, "Oh, you know." I think he asked him something like that, like, "Where is it?" And that's his response. Oh, it's just in the center of the earth. That's all you need to know.
yeah. And we imagined all sorts of things. What we did not imagine is, I guess I don't know what order we're going to tackle it. I guess we're talking about Matrix Reloaded at this point. So let me pivot to that. It's fine. It's going to bounce back and forth. Uh, yeah, the I did not expect Zion to look like that. Like from what I like, humanity was on its knees. I thought that like the Nebuchadnezzar was like one of a couple ships, and there was like a small little podunk colony, sort of half built around the warmth of the Earth's core. That seems pretty desolate. So
Yep.
when you see this huge thing with like, VR program, people tapping away at
Oh
VR screens to
God.
open up the
Yeah.
gates and like
What they
several
say, like
commanders.
"Welcome home, Nebuchadnezzar" and stuff like this. Oh God, it's bad.
Yeah, it was not is not at all what we imagined. I think we now know that that's what it is. But if you like, when I did my video about it earlier in the year, I was like, I'm trying to look at the Matrix as it was at the time, and rewatching it purely from a 1999 standpoint. And if you imagine what Zion was and all these other things were from that perspective, it was completely different from what they showed. And like it kind of, honestly, it kind of like kicked Morpheus in the balls. He wasn't that important. He was actually kind of a lesser person in the grand chain of things. And I didn't think we necessarily thought that he was the leader, but he seemed like a pretty important guy, or at least.
Mm.
But it seems like a lot of people kind of disrespected him or didn't really care who he was, which that kind of sucks because he was one of my favorite parts of the original film, just his leadership and his unwaveringly. He was like a unwaveringly convinced in his beliefs. You know, he believed in the one, and he was proven right at the end, and that was a great kind of. It was like his defining character is that he was always certain and had conviction.
Yeah, and then he gets back to Zion, and you've got the whole like Morpheus, you were ordered to return to Zion at T 800 hours. You report to counselor whatever for debriefing and stuff like this. It's like that wasn't the preface of what the whole thing was set up to be like. You've got this
No.
whole hierarchy of people that sit on a council with dressed up like hippies that just talk about things all day, and all these different sort of military people that are controlling who goes in and out of the city and stuff. Yeah, I agree. It didn't match with how they built the whole world around it in the first film.
Yeah, it was very kind of structured. They had like a whole council slash Congress, whatever. They had a sort of military ranks and things like that. I kind of imagined it as sort of a commune where like everybody was kind of equal. It was so small that they didn't really have enough population or space to really enforce roles and governments necessarily. But yeah, they made it a whole lot bigger, which I think was not necessarily a mistake, but I didn't like that direction so much.
It
Uh,
should have been. It should have been the Terminator One scene. When you have the flashback where Kyle Reese goes back to
yeah,
like the resistance base, and they're all like huddling in front of TVs that have fire in them for heat. That's what it should have been, really. I mean, on a grander scale, because you've got people who've created hovercrafts, but I mean, you don't need fleets of giant mech machines. It actually kind of just seems stupid. It's like, well, how is it so hard to fight back when you're obviously mass producing mech suits that have got machine guns on both arms and stuff like this. Everyone's got their own little personal quarters, and they're obviously not really struggling for resources because no one looks like they're starving to death or anything. Everyone's clean and they got nice hair and stuff. So it's like, really, is the things going that bad? Like, I don't know, man. I'd probably just be laying low if I got out of the Matrix at that point. I wasn't really trying to be fighting back at that stage. I'd just be living life. I don't know. Like, it didn't really portray such a terrible world to be living in.
yeah. It also kind of undermined the importance of somebody beating the Matrix's code. Like a lot of people didn't even believe that Neo was anything special because like, oh, you're just that kind of religious nut who did something in the Matrix. Woohoo, we've got bigger things to worry about. That kind of
Mm.
really kind of felt like it was undermining the importance of the first film. I think it would have
Yeah.
been. I think there should have been. Obviously, you need a bigger, newer conflict to stretch across two films, but there was a certain amount of stepping back a bit from the first film. Like I mentioned this in a conversation with somebody else the other day, where I was like, they didn't remove any powers from Neo, but we assumed that he could do a lot more than just fly around and stop bullets,
And
right?
punch a little bit harder. Yeah.
Yeah, we assumed he could pretty much write and almost explicitly are told that he can now write the code the Matrix as he sees fit, or he can remake the Matrix as he sees fit. So we assumed that he
Mm.
could that flying and bullet stopping and stuff like that was just the beginning of his powers.
Yeah.
But the Reloaded makes us think that that's the end of his powers too, which is a little bit of a hard pill to swallow, so to speak.
Well, it's always too like I think the first film, and I don't think I'm alone in saying that, but it really just didn't feel like it needed a sequel. Like it really had like a final ending in the sense of like okay, I'm the one as it was kind of prophesized or whatever. Like you say, it ends with him saying, "I'm going to show the people what you don't want them to see." In essence of like, okay, well that's it. Like humanity's won. He flies off and that's it. But yeah, it's like, well, where do you go from that point? And you can't really take a character at that point who's God mode. You kind of have to like ground him a little bit, I guess. Again, I guess like to kind of just make sense of the character. But it's like, yeah, what are you going to do? Like, you're not just going to stay plugged in the Matrix the whole time. You've got to come out at some point and eat and stuff. So, ironically, it's like you kind of realistically had to do that and show what happens when he's not plugged in. But that's the most boring stuff in the movie, man. Like, get out of Zion. I don't care about all this crap in Zion. Get back to the Matrix. Like, get back to what the film is named after. You need to get back to that point as soon as possible.
Yeah, and I haven't counted the minutes. I'm sure somebody has, but about good probably 60 to 75% of the Matrix is in the Matrix. You only get about a quarter or more.
Oh, the first one, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it
yeah.
out in the real world, which I thought was a good ratio. I think
Mm.
Reloaded's probably more like 50-50, and I'd say Revolutions is more like 75-20, the opposite, where
Yeah.
most of the film is in the real world and very little of it is in the Matrix, which that ratio is interesting in that that's also the ratio of how much I like the movies. But
Yeah,
all,
I think it's about an hour into Reload until he actually finally goes back in and starts like fighting Smith and all that kind of stuff from memory. I think like
yeah,
literally the first hour Reloaded is all the Zion. There's a bit at the start when he fights the new agents, but that goes for like 10 minutes and then it's just Zion shit for like a good 30, 40 minutes of the film from memory.
yeah, and they didn't. I don't think they really knew how to start the film, unlike the original film, which they knew exactly how to get you into invested in the film. Like they do like a quick an early teaser of a later fight with Trinity, and to be fair,
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
the production values of that are incredible. They look really really good. The explosions and the camera angles and stuff looks great, but it's basically the same fight scene over again. Just later on you get a quick cut, I think, of it, but yeah, and then we get into like the kind of meeting and stuff, and it didn't the movie didn't really know when to go fast or when to go slow or when to kind of pick up the pace. It was just kind of meandering there for a bit. I think it kind of picks up. The highlight of Reloaded, in my opinion, is the chateau. I think it kind of picks up there.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
when you think about it, most of the movie is side quest, kind of like
Escort quest too at the end, then when they need to get the guy out as well.
yeah, like the key maker, the key, the thing to get into the room to do the thing. We don't even know what's in there yet. Like it's
Yeah.
all kind of like it reminds me a lot of in retrospect, kind of reminds me a lot of the Star Wars sequels as well, and especially the last one, Episode 9, where it's just like getting the MacGuffin to get the next MacGuffin to get to the next MacGuffin to get to the scene that's important. And I don't, again, comparing to the original again, the original film felt like there was always a reason for every single scene. There's always like
Mm.
either character development or learning something new. It was always spoon feeding us or either character progression or some sort of important facet or rule or law or system that we now had to understand.
Mm.
Whereas it almost felt like the Matrix Reloaded, as cool as the action was at times. I didn't really like the Burly Brawl, but I did like the Chateau fight because that was mostly practical effects.
Yeah, it was all practical, I think, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. Even you could even see the people on wires like spinning from staircase to staircase and stuff. Very great, like mix of weaponry and things like that. And it made sense, I guess, because now bullets are useless. But wouldn't swords also be useless? But I guess we're not supposed to think about that.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it felt a lot more meandering. Like it was kind of keeping Neo busy because if Neo was able to get to his friends immediately, he would just wreck house. He would just destroy everybody. So it was a little bit of keeping Neo busy because we made him too powerful, kind of thing. That's what I kind of got from the second movie.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you say, when people talk about how bad it is, and it is pretty crappy. Maybe bad's a bit harsh, but it's pretty crappy. It's like the one thing I always like go straight to is that one scene where the Merovingian craps on for like 10 minutes
Yeah.
about a cake that gives a woman an orgasm or something. Like that one scene when he just like, what purpose does this have
No.
on the rest of the story? It really is just like it's not getting us to the next point. It's just let's just sit here and watch a dude talk about an orgasm cake for 10 minutes, and then it finally gets to the next scene where they make the deal with his wife or something to rescue the keymaker. Like it's just pointless, but it was just wasted time to get us to that next point to find the keymaker. But it's like you say, like the first film never had those scenes that were just simply filling time. It was always like, no, we're getting to this next point. And it's the same thing with that whole like Zion bit at the start when he's getting chastised by the council. I can't remember the dialogue because I pretty much wipe out during those scenes and ignore it. But it's just filler, man, to get to the next point, to the next kind of action scene. It wouldn't surprise me if they wrote the action scenes first and then they kind of built the story around that. I kind of get the sense of that sometimes. Do you know what I mean?
That
Because I know the
happens, yeah.
freeway scene. Yeah, I know the freeway they built a whole freeway for that sort of that action scene. And it wouldn't surprise me if that was almost kind of like the pitch of like, we're going to have this freeway scene and like they start building that first and they just kind of keep filling in the blanks of what's going to happen around it.
Yeah, I wouldn't put it past them for that. That actually happens sometimes. I guess the last couple of Mission Impossible movies, they had the set pieces for the action scenes first, and the script after that. And so
Mm.
script writers would have to kind of figure out, okay, well, how do we get the people from point A to fighting on the top of a plane, or something like that. Like that's just an example, but it does happen, I guess, in some things, and because these action sets take a lot of planning, a lot of work to make them actually look good and properly produced. So it is quite possible. I don't have any data on that. I've not dug into what came first, the action or the script, but it has happened later on, at least, if not before as well. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, it does seem like busy work, like especially for Neo. Like there isn't really I guess later on there's a payoff for the whole uh, Agent Smith, cloning himself. Eventually, he kind of clones himself into the whole world, and the Matrix is basically ruined because of that.
Yeah.
But that almost seemed like, all right, who else do we have? Oh, guess what? Agent Smith was popular in the first one. Like he probably should have been gone in the first film, but he didn't really come back because he was necessarily it was necessarily important for him to come back, but because people loved him so much. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No,
Decisions like that.
exactly.
It was decisions like that
Yeah.
that kind of made the the sequel kind of definitely more flawed than the original.
Like I reckon I could guarantee that the Burly Brawl thing came out of a conversation of someone going like, "How cool would it be if Neo fought like 100 Smiths at once?" Like that, I guarantee that's how that scene came together. It was never written like, then Smith turns up. Like that was guaranteed that was the thought process first and foremost, and then they write what happens around that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and
And
then
yeah, I mean that. Yeah, no, sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead. Yeah, I've been talking a lot. Yeah.
No, I was just gonna, yeah, and I was gonna say, and then it kind of flows into that third film. It's like, well, where do you go from that point? Like, that's just they just kind of make him up to be the big bad villain, when really why is he coming back when Neo just kind of smoked him in the end of that first film? Like, it's just like you say, it felt more out of necessity than actually creativity to bring him back for that reason.
Yeah, it's just bringing back a character because they were popular. It reminds me of bringing back Palpatine in Episode 9. It's like, who do we got
Ah,
that people
jeez.
liked? Okay, cool. Let's bring him back. And it's
Yeah.
just like I love Hugo Weaving. He's great. I've seen a lot of movies outside of the Matrix, and I think he's a very talented actor. But the yeah, he didn't need to come back. I think that his particular experience was no different from any of the other agents. Like he had a semblance of something unique because he was actually like he took his earpiece off in the first movie and sort of kind of admitted his own motivations to Morpheus, saying that he hates this whole thing. He wants it all gone. He despises humans. He despises uh, the stink of the Matrix, and he just wants the keys to Zion so he can erase any threat, so he doesn't have to exist anymore in this filthy VR simulation. Like I like that bit because it kind of gave him some character outside of just the Matrix hive mind, but yeah, he didn't need to come back. I would have been fine with some new threat or some new villain.
Yeah, I mean, what like you got the Merovingian? They could have just built upon that guy as the villain, the antagonist for the next thing, and just kind of worked their way into making him more of a threat. Instead, he's just kind of this weird pompous French dude who, yeah, makes the I still can't get over it. The weird thing about the cake that gives the woman an orgasm, and then he goes off and gets a sneaky beige in the bathroom or something, even though he's got a smoking hot wife. It's like okay, it's rubbish, man.
Yeah,
Um,
and like I
it
guess
just doesn't go anywhere.
yeah, computers then can now feel emotions. They can now love. They can get jealous. We're dropping a lot of stuff on here without getting in very far into it. All of a sudden, and yeah, I could see like I don't want to backseat right the Matrix sequels. That's kind of silly, but I could see something like that kind of being an interesting plot if it were written in a different way, like maybe some powerful program, like a rogue program, like say the Merovingian was trying to take over the Matrix, versus the order, the kind of predictable order of the machines. Like a rogue
Mm.
AI is more of chaotic, less controlled, less orderly, less lawful. Whereas the machines, we despise them, but they at least have like a code or a moral ethics or whatever. Like in a way, they have a system that they conform to. I could see that being like a conflict in the film, like maybe.
You might have touched onto it, man. Like when you were mentioning Smith before, like that probably would have been the logical step to take it. Is that the
Mhm.
Merovingian kind of leads this group of similar programs like Smith who went rogue, right? And then that's kind of like his army that he's built to take over the Matrix. That would have been a way more kind of cohesive step to take it. You actually maybe you just tapped into it then. You might have just figured out the sequels to fix them.
Yeah, I mean, that's not to be the Merovingian. Maybe they could have developed Smith more because despite Smith being able to replicate himself a million times over, he doesn't really seem like that much of a threat, especially to Neo, until at the very, very end of the third film, I should say. And also they just, like, about 30 minutes in, throw in the idea that a computer can take over a human mind, like in the real
Yeah.
world. Like that was like, ooh, you got to earn that, guys. You got to earn that. That's a bit of a leap right there.
Can we just talk about the fact how no one picked up on the fact that that guy was acting exactly like Agent Smith when he came out of this machine? He's like, if
Yeah.
I'm not me, then who am I? Didn't someone have to go at some point? Hang on, man, this guy sounds a lot like Agent Smith. You know,
Yeah.
did no one put the pieces together at some point? You know?
Yeah. This is another kind of inconsistency I noticed in the sequels, in that the city is so big, Zion is so big, and the structure is so vast, and that they have like a pecking order and chain of command and stuff, but yet they're so incredibly trusting of other humans. So they treat each
Mm,
other as if they don't, like, it kind of works this way. In like a small town, everybody trusts each other, but in a big city, everybody distrusts each other. Like, the
yeah.
more people you have, the more of a mistrust and the more of suspicion and assumption that people might do something bad. So they kind of acted toward, I guess his name was Bane, the guy we knew for 5 seconds before he was taken over by Agent Smith.
Oh,
Uh,
that his name was it?
yeah, I think it was Bane, which is, yeah, great name, right? Um,
Yeah.
might as well call him Evil Guy, but
Yeah.
uh, they just like assume that he's on the up and up, even after he's found in, I think this was Revolutions, but even after he's found the only survivor and everyone else is dead and the ship was obviously sabotaged, they still don't lock him up. So like the kind of attitude that they have, where like, oh, we're all humans, we're on the same side. We also have 10,000 people, and we have a pecking order, and we lock people up and all that other stuff. Something doesn't. One of those works, one of those doesn't. You know what I mean?
No, it should. There's a definite eyebrow raising moment there of why that dude wasn't looked upon with a bit more scrutiny. Yeah, when
Yeah.
he comes out acting like a super mega weird dude, like super creepy, and his entire crew is vanished, kind of thing. Yeah, it doesn't quite connect properly.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to talk about Reloaded without talking about Revolutions, but I definitely appreciated uh, I definitely appreciated Reloaded more, because I guess it just kind of, even if the characters and the world building wasn't as up to snuff, it still had like more solid in Matrix action, which I appreciated. Like, I do really enjoy the chateau and the later on the crazy freeway chase scene.
Yeah,
Even if you take it into context of like, this was kind of just the second or third scene of getting the keymaker and evading bad guys, like that was just like three scenes in a row of that. It still was an entertaining action scene for sure. Uh,
yeah. I think yeah. I mean, I think it definitely is held up by the action. It's just a shame that the stuff that sort of comes in between it's often incomprehensible and doesn't really connect that well. But no one like yeah. I think when you see most people talking about those sequels, that's generally the consensus is that they're pretty dumb films, but the action's okay. I just have issues with just the lack of practical effects versus CGI in a lot of the different scenes. Like you say, the chateau thing is so fantastic because it's clearly shot with live action stuff. The dudes who he's fighting are clearly trained. Everyone's choreographed. You have those like lingering shots that go on for like 6 seconds of just really cool looking fight choreography. But then yeah, it's just kind of ruined by that Burly Brawl thing when as soon as he picks up that pole out of the ground, it just turns into like a video game and
yeah,
just these inhuman. And I seem to again to remember BTS stuff where the Wachowskis were saying how, now with CGI we can create anything we want. We can do this, this, and this, and it's like, but it's not as impressive anymore. Because you watch the shot, like you say, you watch that first film and you saw the shots in that for the first time, and your brain just goes, "How the fuck did they do that?"
yeah,
Whereas you see some of that stuff now and Reloaded, it's like, "Oh, well, that's just a computer." That's not impressive.
yeah. What really kind of sent you for a loop in the original, and some of the shots in the sequels, is that you could tell it was real, but there's no way you could do that in reality. That's what really tripped you up. It's like you could tell that's actually a real life Trinity right there kicking somebody, but that shot is impossible. And that's what really kind of engages you in the shot, because it's the combination of unreality and reality. Whereas I had even in 2003, I thought the Burly Brawl looked terrible. I remember distinctly
Oh, it's
thinking,
dreadful. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Even at the time, it looked really bad because I'd already
I
dabbled
think
in
it
like,
starts off good. Yeah, I think it starts off good, like, 'cause it is
yeah,
live action, but then, like I say, once he gets the pole, there's that shot when he's, like, running around them, and he's, like, doing, like, a stripper pole thing, and he's just spinning around. It's like, "What?" Like,
yeah,
that's just like, it's so dreadful.
yeah. They really could have gotten creative with that. Like there have been CGI crowds and stuff before in movies, and those work pretty well because it was distant enough, and they put like a lens blur on it, or or you're not focused on that. But when the entire shot becomes CGI, that's when things really kind of go off the rails because you have no reality. Like like hard cut from live action to all CGI, and the motion's all
Yeah.
wrong. So yeah, no, it definitely didn't work out that well. I like the chateau. I like the chase. Beginning of the Burly Brawl, they actually had a bunch of people dress up just like Agent Smith, and then they used computers to place his face on all of them. So it
Yeah,
was,
one of my mates was an Agent Smith in that scene too,
oh,
actually.
really? That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He was one of
Small
the
world.
Smiths.
Small world.
Yeah.
Did they shoot that in Sydney as well?
Yeah, they shot parts of it in Sydney, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure about the sequels. But
Yeah.
yeah, and then there's also just I think the acting quality needs to be talked about. Like there's actually a great article that what's his name? Bill Pope, the cinematographer, talks about his experience because he was the guy that they did the first movie with, and a lot of the same actors, a lot of the same directors, same writers, everything. The second movie, but you'll notice the second and third movie, everybody just seems very, very dull, and I always wondered about that. And there's actually a really good reason for it. Bill Pope says that between the first film and the second and third films, the Wachowskis read a book by what's the guy who directed The Shining? Kubrick, Stanley Kubrick. And in his book about directing, he says that to get natural takes from actors, you have to wear them out. So sometimes it might take 90 takes to get a natural take. These two movies, these two sequels, were shot back to back over 8 months,
Yep.
I think. So imagine 8 months of doing 90 take shots. That would drive anyone to like absolute monotony and just like depression.
Yeah, I
My
mean, I know that was the case for The Shining, right? I think that's that classic example is where he just wore what's her name, Shelley? Is it not Shelley? Is it
uh,
Shelley Winters?
no, it's Shelley Duvall.
Sheila Duvall. Yeah, I know he wore her down, but that kind of works in that context because she's supposed to be kind of wrung out and strung out like that. But did they really need to be like that in the Matrix? Do you know what I mean? Like, was
No,
that really necessary? You know?
no, I don't think so. And Bill Pope, my favorite quote from Bill Pope was, after shooting the Matrix sequels, I wanted to dig Stanley Kubrick up and kill him again. It's just like he was completely done with that and that was the advice they went through. I think that they kind of thought that they still needed, the Wachowskis needed to learn how to direct better, and so they were taking advice from a master. And Kubrick's done some great films for sure, but
Yeah.
I think they might have taken the wrong advice at the wrong time because I think that, like, if you rewatch the original film, you see Neo. He's excited at times. He's scared at times. Like, Trinity, help! Like he's angry.
Mm.
He's emotive. He like when he finds out that his world isn't real, he's like freaked out, completely filled with like anxiety, panic, depression, all these kind of emotions. And in the sequels, he's just like, I'm Keanu and I'm calm, I guess, or something. And just like
Yeah.
one
He's just
emotion.
tired. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's just tired the whole film. Yeah. The classic scene is when he's chatting the Oracle and she's saying all this stuff, all these incredibly profound things, and he's always just like, "Why? What do you mean? No." Like that's his response. Like everything she says, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
She gives you these huge answers. Well, Zion will fall, and this will happen if you can't save Trin. And he's just like, "What are you talking about?" That's
Yeah.
like his response to every question. He's just like, "I'm so tired. I'm sick of punching people in the face." He just doesn't want to do it anymore.
Yeah. Not to mention the fact that they went even over the top with the sunglasses. So generally you can't even see people's
Oh.
eyes, even in the dark. And like, I make this
Yeah, the one
argument.
scene in the sewer when they're all like having that meeting and everyone's got a sign that's like, "It's a bit dark in here, guys. Anyone want to take their sunnies off?"
Yeah, like there's lots of scenes in the original where if they're, a lot of the scenes are outdoors in bright Sydney with like bright sun reflecting off of the rooftops. Sunglasses make sense. They also look cool
Yep.
for sure, but they make sense. But even in the lobby scene, there's bright lights coming from the front doors. sunglasses, you could still see everything in the lobby, but in the dark in a sewer, really? It seems like they kind of, it's like they took the wrong lessons from the Matrix. They thought like, oh, people like action, they like over the top, they like sunglasses. Let's give them more of that. And
Yeah.
I think Joel Silver actually mentioned that in an article. He mentioned that because partially due to the fact that everybody ripped the Matrix off, the Wachowskis felt the need to outdo themselves. So they're like constantly trying to push the envelope and trying to do bigger, better, crazier action and CG or visual effects set pieces, and that might have led to like some of the crazier stuff. Whereas had they not had that external influence of everybody trying to outdo the Matrix, they might have done something a little bit more low key and possibly better. Who knows? But yeah, Joel
Yeah,
Silver said something like that. Yeah.
I often wonder if it was just like a product time because I know that when the second film came out, there was that I think it was Samsung phone that was in the film that they were also marketing, and I remember the Neo sunglasses being like a marketed thing. So I almost wonder if it was just to like push the sunglasses thing, man, the product placement stuff. Because Trinity had a very distinct pair that she wore, and Neo obviously had his. I don't. I also wonder if that was just a factor, just to help kind of push product placement stuff a little bit as well. You know, maybe that was the angle.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, they definitely made this into a transmedia franchise. And did you want to hop over to Enter the Matrix to kind of explore a little bit of that if you wanted to?
Sure, sure.
Sure. Yeah. I liked it when it came out. I thought it was cool that there was like more Matrix. Like at the time, more Matrix equaled good. And I would say it's probably one of the better tie-in games because they actually had people who made the movies kind of work on the movies as well. So I thought it was decent in that regard. But like, I'd be interested to see your perspective on it because you did a whole review on it. I haven't played it for a few years now, but it was definitely janky at times. But it did kind of capture that Max Payne-esque, bullet time, crazy action stunts, shootouts, decent shootouts. Probably not as refined as Max Payne for sure, but I remember it being a fairly repetitive but enjoyable romp. What about you?
I think it's yeah. I think that the concept is cool. I just think it's ultimate. The problem it had was that it just had to come out when the film came out because it was like had to tie in with that.
Yeah,
And I think you can. I think it's easy to dig around and find sort of the development history. But yeah, the general story about it was that yeah, it wasn't finished, and it just pretty much they didn't have a choice. They had to release it, and you can kind of see that. Like I think the game starts off really well. You play through those first few levels, and there's like a scene when you first encounter an agent in the game, which is actually really well done. Like the whole level is just you running away from it, and it keeps
yeah,
popping up and taking over guys, and that stuff's cool. But then, yeah, you really get near the end, and there's levels that like you're at an airport, I think one level, and it's literally just like this blank, empty space with no detail. You know what I mean? Because they just didn't
yeah.
have time to put in planes, or I think it's a nighttime setting too, so there's no skybox. It just looks like shit. Um, but the I think the scope of it was pretty cool, and actually. I do think playing as like a character who's like a red pill or whatever who can do all those abilities is pretty awesome. Like you do feel like a badass, and they know like what type of enemies to make you face. Like you only really face like SWAT guys and cops and security guards, so you beat the shit out of these dudes like it's nothing. So I think that the idea is right, but if they had made it for another 18 months, it probably would have been an awesome game, man. It could have been fantastic, but yeah, that's just it had a release date that kind of crunched them and yeah, it's just literally an unfinished game as far as I'm concerned.
I remember the animations in particular. Like the moves you could do were super cool, but like sometimes they wouldn't connect right. It looked a little bit janky. Like I definitely see the idea that it should have been in the oven for another 6 months plus, for just to kind of balance it out a bit more. And make it a
Yeah,
bit more stable. But yeah, that's the eternal problem with tie-in games. Like the best licensed games have always been completely divorced from any movie release. Like Batman Arkham Asylum. It was not tied to any particular Batman movie. It just came out when it was done.
yeah,
Mad Max was sort of tied in with the release of you know uh, Fury Road, but it came out like half a year later, or like it was obviously not timed to be out by the movie came out, and it was solid when it came out. I thought it was really really well made and pretty stable for the time as well too. So like the best
yeah.
movies have always been complete. They can't rush them like and to get them out by the time movies are made. So yeah, it's tough. So I could definitely see why they got it out because it was a whole marketing thing. But Yeah, then you got
which
the
is why I bought it. Like, I mean, I just because I was so desperate to see Reloaded, and I just wanted to play the game because they kind of marketed it on the fact that you could see cinematics and like footage from the film that wasn't even out yet. And when you finish the game, there was like a trailer at the end of the game that showed all this cool stuff from Reloaded that they hadn't even showed. Like, this is before YouTube, so
yeah.
there's nowhere to go online to watch this stuff. So yeah, you finally finished the game and it had this trailer that went for like 2 minutes with really cool music and it showed all this new stuff and it was like, fuck, this is awesome. Like, kind of justified the purchase at that point. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it was a great hype vehicle for sure.
Yeah, and like you say, like it did tie into things that happened in the game, but it was cool to sort of have that moment in the center and be like, oh, that's why I did that in the game. He's the reason, blah blah blah. I could, I did all that stuff, and that was cool. But yeah, it's a shame that it had that, kind of deadline that it had to adhere to because the developers who made it, man, like these are the guys who made like Earthworm Jim. Like, I don't know if you like had that. That was like one of my favorite Mega Drive games when I was a kid. And they were pretty talented developers, so it really didn't fit with their kind of like pedigree as developers that it was that as crappy as it was because it really was crappy. It wasn't great. So it was disappointing, but as far as tying into the product, it really might be one of the best movie tying games I think ever, at least in terms of how faithful it is. I think like the Chronicles of Riddick games are pretty dope. I don't know if you ever
Yeah,
played those.
yeah, those are really good. I'd argue those are probably uh, better, but they are also like well after I think the movie or
Yeah,
so
but they don't really tie into the movies. They're like their own separate stories, but they
yeah.
kind of use. Obviously, they use Vin Diesel, but I'd say they're more like movie based. But yeah, they're definitely some of the best too. But yeah, it's like you say, it's the opposite example of when you don't have that deadline of what you can just do with full creative freedom and whatever time you need to take to get it done. So yeah,
Yeah.
very polarizing looking at them side by side.
Yeah, I was just also just I don't think we'd ever seen that before, where an entire like movie Hollywood scenes were made specifically for a video game that ties into a movie
Mm.
coming out that year. Like we had seen movies or games before which like grabbed clips from the movie. You know, it's always kind of jarring, but this was obviously thought up from the ground up to be to kind of like as a puzzle piece that would fill the full movie in while not spoiling the entire plot of Reloaded. It would still tie in, so you felt it was a very interesting experiment, and it obviously I think it was pretty successful, so it obviously worked. But yeah, the idea that you could actually watch like scenes that weren't in the movie that are exclusive to the video game with these characters that you're going to see on screen later that year, that was pretty incredible. I think that was one of the big selling points. And the game was definitely fun at times. I despise the endless factory and sewer levels, but but
Oh yeah.
yeah, the bank shootouts were kind of like whatever this like bank or offices and stuff like that were pretty
Like
fun.
a post office at the start was actually pretty cool. Yeah, you could
Yeah,
kill some security guards and stuff.
yeah,
Um,
and they did. I did like that they respected the power levels. Like these were like you said, red pills. They weren't Neo, so a handful of cops and security guards and SWAT teams. That's a pretty tough. That's a pretty rough beat. You can defeat them, but they're not. It's these guys aren't Neo, so I like that they kind of had that power level. They mitigated that power level. If you were
yeah, well, if you fought an agent, he would kick your ass. Like, they'd just beat the shit out. You could kind of subdue them, but they would always kill you.
yeah, yeah, I like that there was like this unstoppable threat, kind of like the like Mr. X in the Resident Evil games or whatever. Like it has that kind of unstoppable threat kind of feeling. I did appreciate that
Yeah.
a lot.
But there's actually a few instances in the game where you can kill the agents. Like, there's a couple times they're chasing you, and you can actually kill them. And I honestly think that it was an oversight that the developers didn't realize. Like, there's one bit when you're in like I think it's one of the power station levels, and a agent's coming after you, and you can blow up like a generator or something if he runs past it because it's like splash damage or whatever, it kills the agent, but he doesn't change into like a security guard. Because when they die, they just change back
Yeah,
to whoever they possessed. You kill the agent, it's just like he ragdolls and it's like an agent corpse. So I honestly think that one of the developers just forgot or didn't realize that that was a thing they had to kill them with. Do you know what I mean? It's
so
like another time you could kill them with a grenade launcher, which you weren't supposed to have at that point, I think, in the game, but you could still have a grenade held onto it, and again, you can kill one of them. So yeah, just to further prove how kind of unpolished the game was, because you don't want to be able to kill them. You always want to be running from them.
yeah, yeah, you always want that threat. I wonder if they just really did have just a really high health value set, and people just didn't expect players to figure out a way to actually defeat him or do that much damage to
Yeah,
him or something. But
yeah.
yeah, that is
I don't know.
interesting. That is actually kind of cool. But yeah, I remember that kind of that sort of threat level. Like you felt really powerful, but then you realized that the agents were really powerful, so you had to get out of there. And I definitely enjoyed it. I thought that it was definitely Matrix side quest material. Like the big thing is like killing the power plant, and it's just like okay, but at the same time they did give you something to do that would tie in. You kind of felt like you were being tied into the sequel movies. So on one hand,
Yeah.
it's cool, but at the same time, they did give you like the most boring path through it, unfortunately. And they do indulge in a little bit more of the kind of supernatural stuff, like the rogue AI programs that are werewolves and vampires and stuff. That was a little weird. I don't think they really should have gone that direction. What were your thoughts on that?
Um, yeah, I actually made a joke about it because I'm doing that Path of Neo thing,
Yeah,
and there's a really bad level in Path of Neo. And then I make a joke where I was just like, yeah, actually, I'm starting to take those werewolf levels into the Matrix for granted. I think it's like, in retrospect, they're so much more fun than this. But yeah, it's like you could only kill these programs by like stabbing them with a wooden stake. It's like, okay, this is again, like we're saying again, when the Wachowskis got creative control, man, anything was possible.
yeah, absolutely. I do want to point out to the viewers like this gameplay looks pretty solid, possibly even 60 FPS. I'm not 100% sure on that, but it ran pretty well. I think I played the GameCube version back in the day, and ran pretty well. I remember it being smooth, which is another huge difference between this game and Path of Neo. I remember even at the time, and I was kind of a console peasant at the time. I was like, man, this game, Path of Neo, runs really, really choppy. The frame rate is not solid at all.
Did you
So
have it on PlayStation or what platform did you play it on?
I think Xbox actually for Path of
Yeah,
Neo.
that's what I was playing it on. Yeah, it runs like I'm running on Xbox now and it runs like shit. I was just curious if it was shit on PS2 as well. Because I was a PS2 guy back then. That was always the platform I got, and
Yeah,
PS2 versions were always the worst.
yeah,
Just every single time. There was never an example of cross-platform stuff where the PS2 outperformed anything. It was always the GameCube and the Xbox. So it
yeah. I
was
mean,
good to know they're all shit either way.
yeah, the PS2 was like the best selling, but also the weakest of the three consoles. That aside from the
Mm,
fact that the GameCube had a smaller disc size, and that it had a
yeah,
lot less data. But yeah, I think it went PS2, GameCube, Xbox in terms of power. So the best ports were usually the Xbox. So the fact
yeah,
that it was ran that badly on Xbox is pretty telling.
yeah. Yeah, there's like a level in Path of Neo where you got to like run up, like it's basically like the clock tower from the end of Batman. You just keep running up
Yeah.
these stairs, and it's got to be like 7 frames a second or single digit frames. I was just like, I can't believe this is in a finished game, you know?
Yeah, and if you want to, we can dig into that. That was a couple years later, right? It was 2005, I think.
Yeah, well after anyone really cared about Matrix at that point. So good
Yeah,
on them for still sticking to it.
it's kind of amazing. 2003 saw probably the highest excitement for Matrix content, and also like the end of the excitement of Matrix content for a long time. It was I think it might have been just the disappointment overall with Revolutions, but also over it went from being like underexposed kind of like we had one film to work off of to like overexposure in 1 year. We had three movies. Did Animatrix come out the year before? Was it also 2003?
Yeah, I think it came out in 2003. I remember getting on DVD, and I'm pretty sure it was before the movie. So yeah, it must have been around that time.
Yeah, so three movies. We had Reloaded, Animatrix, and Revolutions all in 2003, and Enter the Matrix, and whatever
Yeah,
else they had tie-ins, stuff like that. I'm sure there were probably commercials, probably McDonald's Happy Meal bonuses or whatever for
yeah.
rated R franchise. I don't know about making that part up, but yeah, we got
Plus,
real.
just the Matrix Online, I think, came out after the third film, I think, and I think the Matrix Online is canon. So I think pretty sure what happens in Matrix Online is like what happens because I know no spoilers, but yeah, certain characters die in the Matrix Online storyline, and that's canon. That's basically how they died. Yeah,
Well, yeah. I
like
mean,
big characters.
it is canon because if we're going to talk about Matrix Resurrections, a certain character that we know and love is dead in the Matrix
Mm,
Resurrections, and we're not even talking
yeah.
about the main two. But yeah, so yeah, we're kind of bouncing over the place. Did you have anything else on the sequels, like how
Not really.
the way it
They're
ends at
pretty.
all?
Not. I mean, Resurrections is definitely the worst one. I don't even really remember too much about it. I think it has that one cool scene at the start. I think when they're like t taking on the Merovingian, or they go down to his club, which was pretty cool. Because again, it's like I'm a bit of a simp for any action scene that uses practical effects, and again, most of that was pretty practical. Um, but yeah, man, I mean, it's all just filler until the final scene with Smith versus Neo, which again I thought started off cool and then just goes to hell once they're floating in the air and punching each other like they're in zero gravity. It just kind of loses all cohesence at that point.
Yeah, yeah, no, I remember distinctly watching the scene for. My God, we got a lot of bots today. Okay. Um, Distinctly watching a club fight scene in Revolutions where they're fighting a bunch of rando AI guys, and there was like I think, what his name, Seraph, I think, character they introduced in Reloaded, and he's kind of
Yeah,
taking the place of Neo because Neo's like out of the picture for a bit, as he often is, and they essentially almost recreate the lobby scene from the original film in
yeah,
Revolutions, but the twist is that some of the enemies can go on the ceiling.
yeah.
Um, and it's so telling if you watch those two scenes back to back. If you compare the lobby scene from the original and similar with the columns and the fighting and the bouncing off walls and stuff from Revolutions, it's like, what happened in 4 years? Like, it's the new scene is like filled with CGI, people zooming back and forth, just no tension, has sort of like a actually kind of quiet, sort of understated electronic track in the background. It just feels so blasé compared to the original, which had like the propeller heads song thumping, and like every single shot sounded like a punch to the face. It was just the sound design, like all the gunshots were really really loud. You could hear
Yeah.
all the rocks cracking and crumbling. Yeah, it was just really really, that particular scene highlighted the difference between the original and the sequels in terms of just how impactful it was.
Well, plus the common sense, or not the common sense. I mean, just the actions of the characters. Like in the lobby, the SWAT guys are firing a bazillion shots at them, and they're not hitting. But you kind of your suspension of disbelief there is the fact, well, they're constantly moving, like they're running up the walls and stuff. So obviously they're so agile that they can't hit him or whatever. But in that scene, it's like they're just like standing still and shooting at each other at one point. Like Morpheus is just literally standing still. He's like shooting, but no one can hit anyone. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
why can't you hit that person? And there's that really dreadful shot of a guy like jumping off a ceiling onto a wall, and then
Oh
like,
yeah.
and it's like so CGI. He looks like a frog, and it's like, bro, what was your tactical plan there, where you just jumped straight out in the open? Like, what were you thinking? What did you think was going to happen, dude? You know, he gets
Yeah.
gunned down immediately. It's like, it's a hell of a move, you know.
Yeah. It'd be bad
Yeah,
enough.
it's all it's the spectacle versus it kind of being a spectacle, but also like making sense in what's happening.
Yeah, I know exactly the same shot you're talking about. It looks so bad. It's obviously a CG model, and not only does it a really bad tactic, he completely loses any tactical advantage he has, but also he gets shot immediately, like you said.
Like
Yeah,
straight away.
yeah. Whereas, like you could definitely, like, the movies are definitely have a style over substance at some points, but you could kind of see the advantages of some of the original movies shots. Like in the lobby scene, Neo does a somersault, grabs the gun off the floor, and gets back up behind a column. It's
Yeah.
showy, but at the same time, he is grabbing a gun off of the floor while also being a moving target. So
Yeah.
like you can see an advantage there. It is definitely showy, but the whole movie is very showy. So
But like you say, like it's showy, but with a purpose. Like Trinity running up the wall and doing a cartwheel. Yeah, she's okay. She's running up the wall, but she's evading bullets and then using that momentum to get behind cover too. It's not just like, hey, watch me run up this wall, kind of thing.
yeah, and these guys are like, we assume like a SWAT team or whatever, and they're trained to fight people on the ground. The last thing that they expect is somebody running up the wall. So they're kind of using the over the top stunts as a way to throw off their enemy too, because they're not prepared for those kind of tactics. So
Really cool. Yeah, really cool observation that I only kind of read recently, maybe like a year or so ago, was about. And you probably don't think too much about the line, but when Trinity goes, no one's ever done anything like this before, and he's like, that's why it's going to work. And it really that is kind of explains why they get through that scene, is
yeah,
because realistically, none of the red pills have ever fucking attacked full on like the Matrix like that. So
yeah,
the Matrix is like, well, hang on, what the fuck? This person's running up the wall. It's probably never programmed. itself to be able to deal with that kind of threat. Do you know what I mean? So that just kind of makes that scene even more sense in the sense of why don't they hit them? Why can't they stop them? Well, the Matrix has never dealt with that threat of them using those abilities in such an offensive manner. So there's just so much going on in that lobby scene. You can write it off as just a cool spectacle, but it's like, man, it's deep on so many levels. Plus the fact that Trinity goes in there with basically one gun versus Neo. I read a YouTube comment a while back where someone said how like Neo's like spraying and praying the whole scene. Like he's basically just like a noob, just spraying with like 50 guns. It's like, yeah, that's pretty true. Trinity takes one gun. She still cleans house with one gun, whereas Neo goes through like, 7 different guns to like get the same result.
Yeah, I love how there's brief moments of self-awareness and kind of like nods to the camera where like not fourth wall breaking, but like how goes in and they scan him and he's like he's loaded from like head to toe and like guns, machine guns, Uzis, shotguns, like pistols, grenades, and like the guy's just like, holy shit! He's just like in disbelief, like what the hell did you come here to do? So it's like I love that that expression is just so sort of completely
he deserves
like
an Oscar for that line. That bloke, I
think. He's like, holy shit! It's so good. But
I've often wondered, like, is he supposed to be like realistically? He's just another person plugged into the Matrix, right?
yeah,
His existence as a security guard. So technically, he's like an innocent guy
yeah,
that just gets gunned down, right?
yeah, that's the weird thing about the morality. And now they do kind of, I will say they do kind of correct that, or they address that in the one of the VR construct scenes with them with Morpheus when they're walking down the street and like the Club to Death is blaring and he's like talking about how the Matrix is a system and people are so invested in the system that they'll die defending it. And then right at that point, he sees the woman in the red dress, Neo that is, and he turns to see her again, and then it's a replica of Agent Smith, right? And then that's the lesson of that whole construct is that everybody, potentially anybody and everybody, is potentially your enemy at a moment's notice. So like they can't basically it's kind of bleak and really really dark but they can't
afford to let people live, basically.
Yeah, they can't afford to acknowledge these people's innocence because at any point in time anybody plugged into the Matrix can be your worst enemy. So
you can be an agent kind of thing.
Yeah, so it's a really messed up bit of morality. And interestingly enough, we delved into we're doing full spoilers here, and this game isn't even playable really today anyway. But in Matrix Online, I didn't play it, but I read some and saw some scenes of it. They address that morality too. The kind of really fucked up thing about the Matrix is that their end goal is to free humanity. That would lead to millions of people dying. There's no way you could turn the Matrix off and collect everybody anywhere fast enough before they all died, before a lot of them died. So like
plus they said, right, that like a lot of people's minds just reject the truth. So they would just have a heart attack and basically die anyway. So even if you can get to them, there's a 50-50 chance they're either going to accept reality or they're just going to have a heart attack and die.
Yeah, in the first movie, it talks about that, how like, Keanu Reeves was like 35 at the time when he did that movie. Like he had a really hard time letting go. Imagine somebody who had lived longer, who had kids, who had other investments and bigger losses than he did. They would have an incredibly difficult time letting go, en masse, and not with a crowd of people there to support him either, too. So, like, the end goal of freeing humanity would probably lead to massive deaths. And I think that the Matrix Online actually has a line about that from Morpheus saying that, like, as they freed, basically entire crops would die of people if they freed them, which is really messed up. Like millions would probably die.
And they do kind of touch on that in Resurrections, which again is actually probably one of the few things it does well is how they say, like, I think Neil Patrick Harris's character says it right, where he's like, most people don't want to be disconnected at this point. Like they've fine-tuned the point now where everyone is just so into it that it's like it's not the way it used to be where they could just keep rescuing people. Like people just don't want to leave it anymore. They're so connected to the system.
Yeah. Yeah,
one of the few things I think that movie, the Resurrections, actually does well. Is it Resurrections? Yes, I can't remember.
Yeah, Resurrections. They really need to stop doing sequels with R in the name.
Yeah.
But yeah, and that was already brought up in the first movie, so it's not necessarily a new idea. But I do like that concept. It's too bad they didn't explore it more. Did you have anything else to say about Revolutions, maybe the ending, or what you felt about how it ended, or the themes it brought up, or do you want to just jump right into Resurrections?
I just go into Resurrections. I can't even really remember the end of Revolutions. Like I said, apart from the fight scene, which was just a big spectacle anyway, and just the
Yeah,
nonsensical rubbish about why he lets himself get taken over in the end and stuff like that. But yeah, it's the last hour was just a mess, man. And the whole scene when he's like powers have translated over into real life or something, and yeah,
yeah. There's like a
weird.
sliver of an interesting idea where he starts to have powers in real life, like he has some sort of deeper connection to the machines, even in the real world. It's like that's cool. But I remember the transition between Reloaded and Revolutions being pretty weak. Like the final stinger was Bane is unconscious from his ship being nearly destroyed, and Neo is unconscious from him taking out some squiddies in the real world, which is like what the hell. And they're both together in the same room. Dun dun dun. They even literally do that. Like they do a dun 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 at the
Yeah,
end.
they do. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it was really kind of cheesy. Uh, but yeah, the last movie is just all over the place. They get into how machines can love. They love their little child. That they want to put him on the
Oh,
train.
yeah.
The train man can defeat the one easily. Uh, all this other stuff, and how there's like they kind of becomes almost like a Star Wars wannabe at one point because they've got the ship fights, the dog fights. They have those machines that are shooting tons and tons and tons of squiddies, and I always imagined, and this is kind of like again the kind of small thinking we see in the sequels. I always kind of imagined the Squiddies were one of many machines that these guys had at their disposal. Didn't you? Like, I didn't imagine that they were all Squiddies, right?
Yeah, I mean, I assumed that they were kind of like the ground troops or like the shock troops that you just send in to like wipe everything out. Like you're gonna have high casualties, they're gonna get destroyed, but it's like the sheer numbers of them will. It's like the T-800s in Terminator, like
Yeah,
the ones in the future wars. Like they're not really supposed to be super smart. It's just like you just send them in and just to mess everything up, and then whatever's left, you kind of just clean up what's left from that. So they're just sheer numbers. Yeah.
yeah, but
Well, there
like
has to be a high hierarchy, doesn't it? There has to be bigger and tougher machines, certainly.
yeah, and even in the Terminators, I think Terminator One, even definitely Terminator Two, they had bigger machines. They had like tanks, they had aircraft, they had all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
So the ground troops were
Hunter killers, the big sort
yeah,
of
yeah, the
things that chase stuff.
HKs,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and even I'll still to this day defend Terminator Salvation, but that had other kinds of interesting Terminators as well, like the big dudes that could like tear through entire houses and stuff. That was interesting and different.
Hmm.
But it's not a great movie, but I still think it's better than a lot of the sequels, Terminator sequels.
Oh,
But
that's not even a contest. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, with in like you said, the T-800s were just infiltrators. That's what they were good at. So
Yeah.
the problem with the Matrix is that they had like no other ideas. Like, they were all Squiddies. It was a drill and Squiddies. That was the entirety of the Matrix threat, which is really weird considering that these guys dominated the entire world. So I thought that just incessant swarms of Squiddies was an interesting visual, and reading some of the behind the scenes stuff of how they did it, it's kind of cool. They actually used like 2D animation to draw the swarms and stuff. Kind of interesting. But in the end, the big bad is just a face that's made out of Squiddies. I found that really kind of pathetic. I don't know about you, but I found that kind of lame at the end.
Um. Yeah. I mean, I can't. It's kind of cool in a sense, I guess, because it's like you say, it's almost like the hive mind concept of like it's
Yeah,
everything's connected to one thing. So it is kind of cool that it would that's the form it would take. Because I mean, I guess realistically, the top program, whatever it is, like the sort of alpha program, whatever it's got to be called, like it doesn't really have a form. It's just
right.
code, I suppose, right? The thing about it taking like it took like a kid's face or something was just, I guess, purely done for the visual sense. But I mean, if anything, man, maybe that's probably a good thing that they didn't create a bunch of different stupid robots, to include in the thing. It would have just got more sort of washed out with just stupid shit. So maybe that was a blessing in disguise that they didn't add in another 50 different robot types. Like, oh, this is like, the super secret, I don't know, like infiltrator machine that can. Imagine they had something where it could like, change its form to look like Neo or something, or some
Yeah.
stupid plot like that. They could have done so much dumb shit with that, but at least they kept that aspect of it pretty simple, I think.
or if they did pulled a Terminator or Dark Fate, or sorry, not that one, Terminator Genesis, and had a machine that could turn Neo into a robot.
Yeah, imagine that. That would have been
uh,
awesome. That was so well done in Terminator. So why not do it?
so well done. But yeah, no, I could see like, but it just seemed very small thinking. Like, okay, there's nothing but squiddies. It's all squiddies all the way down. But yeah, and then I kind of always irritated me, even at the time, the retcon of. I distinctly remember in the first movie, EMP is our only weapon against the machines. Period.
Mm.
We
Now I can
also
just shoot him now.
we
Don't worry
also
about
got machine guns too. We've got machine
it. Yeah,
guns. We got ships
shoot
with
him.
machine guns too. So I thought that the sort of almost like kind of echoing the nuclear threat, where like if we nuke them, we nuke ourselves, they'll nuke us, kind of thing. Like the only
Yeah.
way we could kill the machines is also by disabling all of our equipment and potentially dying ourselves. Like that was a really cool thing that they teased, and they eventually did in the first film. They killed their ship to kill the squiddies that were just about to kill Neo, right as he
Yeah.
left the Matrix, and that was like the very last second, and everything kind of came together. But yeah, with machine guns, it kind of undermines that a bit. It's like, oh well, we could have just used machine guns.
It's like, damn, they figured out our weakness to bullets. Who would have thought?
That's too bad they figured out our weakness of having unarmored people right in front of a bunch of unarmed mechs.
Oh,
Like,
how's that design? Yeah,
yeah,
let's have everything armored, but your torso. Let's just leave that completely uncovered.
yeah, yeah. So
There's actually a scene in like that Animatrix thing, which is pretty metal, where they show like the Future Wars, whatever it's called, like when they fought them, and they fought in very similar looking armored suit things. I don't know if you remember that scene. And I was also kind of wondered if that was like an influence or like a nod to it, because there's like a bit in that when a dude's in one of those armor suits and the chest plate gets ripped off by like a machine, and then the dude just gets pulled out like he's a piece of meat, which is pretty horrific. But yeah, maybe that was that supposed to be like referencing the fact that they're these reused kind of pieces of armor or something? I don't know.
yeah, I could see that. Like maybe you could. There's some subtle world building there. Like if there was tears at the metal, so these are like kind of hand me downs that have been just kind of destroyed. But
Yeah,
they seem to be in pretty good shape. So it seems like that's the full design, at least if you're just looking at the movies themselves without any other content. Just a really poor design in terms of keeping your little squishy human alive.
it's
But
like, look, we can make 50 of these things, but we can't cover you. I'm sorry. We've got 50 suits to go around, but guys, you're just going to have to stay 100% exposed. I'm really sorry about that, but that's the way the suits are going to work.
yeah, it's a little weird. Like yeah,
Yeah.
just poor design. And I always got the idea like the Nebuchadnezzar was kind of stitched together, wasn't really a prime example of technology. But you see the stuff in Zion, you're like, why don't you have better equipment? You have a huge city with like several layers. This thing is gigantic with tons of moving parts. Why don't you have better equipment? So it's,
People are too busy at the underground orgies, man. They don't have time to research into this stuff. Eh? So many orgies going on every day.
got a rave at 4 p.m. and orgy at 6 p.m. My day's booked, man.
Yeah, then Jack back into the Matrix with a hangover. Imagine that. Like they have a scene where they're like, "How you going?" Oh man, I'm still hungover from last night's rave, dude. Like,
I wanted to save humanity today, but man, last night's orgy was rough.
yeah, I need a couple of days to recoup.
Yeah. So Spartan Ghost 17, £2 says, all right, hi, are we getting another Cyberpunk docu? Yes, eventually. Probably not right away, but eventually there's going to be a part 4. Thanks for your donation. So I guess now might as well kind of, did you have any, I mean, you're obviously reviewing Path and Neo. That's kind of came a couple years after Revolutions. Did you want to get into that, or just want to go jump right into Resurrections? You want to save it for your review?
Yeah, I reckon just get into Resurrections.
Okay, let's just dig into it. Resurrections. Let's see.
It's like ripping the band-aid off. We've just got to get into it.
Yeah. So I went into it with no expectations. I'm sure you're probably in the same boat, right?
Yeah, I mean, hopeful, but not expecting anything.
Yeah, me neither. And I'm going to pull open the most relevant clip to this movie, which is the MTV Movie Awards parody of The Matrix, because that's what this movie is.
Oh, is that the one with Will Ferrell?
Yeah,
Justin
Will Ferrell.
Timberlake?
Yeah, with
Yeah, that was funny as hell. I remember that.
that was a lot of funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me save. Okay, Resurrections. There we go. Yeah, so that was a lot of funny, but like God, what coming out of I didn't actually watch it in the theaters, but finishing Resurrections, especially with the after credit scene, I was like, this is a literal, like an intentional parody of the Matrix, isn't it? Basically, right?
What was after the credits scene? I don't think I remember that.
It was cutting back to the office where, again, all spoilers. The game designers that were working with
Oh, that's right. Yeah, yeah,
Neo, and
yeah.
it's like, forget the reboot. You know what people really like? Cats, the Catrix, and it's like, oh, that's where we're going. Okay.
That whole game dev stuff, man. Like, I don't know what that was supposed to be. You know, that whole weird sequence when there's all these
Yeah.
like game devs, but it's like what? How do you describe it? It's like what people who probably aren't into game development think game devs are like, but it's like an unrealistic portrayal of what they think, that where they just kind of hang out and they're all playing like table tennis and hacky sack and hey man, like let's create a game. Like it's that kind of weird culture of what they think game devs are like. It's not really like that, is it? With people that just act like idiots the whole time. I really doubt that's what it's like in real life. It just seems like such a weird set. It just made no sense. Like, is this supposed to be funny? Like, what's going on here? And the weird sort of soundtrack in the background, and I don't know.
Yeah, it really felt like somebody who had never been at a game dev studio, which is weird because I believe the Wachowskis had worked with the game devs to make the two games, or through three
Yeah,
games
they
actually.
were
But
heavily involved in it. Yeah.
so it almost seems like like a perspective of somebody who doesn't know anything about game dev,
Mm.
mocking game dev, which is weird because like this kind of goes back to the ending, the kind of famous ending of Path and Neo, which is something very, very meta, very, very kind of jokey. Yeah, very controversial ending of Path and Neo. I don't know if we want to spoil it or not because we haven't really talked about it, but it kind of follows suit from that, which is like 2005. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, very, very extremely self-referential to a point of being actually very irritating.
It's like
Um,
obnoxious. Yes.
yeah, obnoxious is a great way of saying it because generally, like, okay, we're expected to like there's a seed of a good idea. I think you'd probably agree in the idea that of hiding the Matrix in plain sight, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so there's a seed of a good idea there, but how they trap Neo in the Matrix again is that they trick him into believing that he wrote the Matrix as a video game, and that's like a good like 30-minute detour from the movie after the original intro, which is so referential. Like, we need a new bullet time. Oh, we need to. Warner Brothers is asking us to reboot the franchise to make a new trilogy.
And even that wasn't that whole like plot was so self-aggrandizing, where it was like, oh, you created like the best game ever made, and you're widely reviewed as being one of the greatest game devs of all time. It was just it just felt like such a commentary on like how the Wachowskis kind of viewed themselves as well. I know it maybe wasn't, but that's how I kind of interpreted it. Like, oh, you need to bring this game back, man. Like it's the best game ever made, and it kind of felt like that's how they thought we should be reacting to this fourth film. Like it was like I'm watching what their fantasy of like our reception was going to be in the game in another like form, basically. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it really felt like the tone of that kind of fourth wall break in the end of Path and Neo stretched into an entire film, where it's
Mm.
like, we could talk about the complex, interesting
Themes of
philosophies and this, that, the other
capitalism and
thing.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
all this other stuff, blah, 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 blah. But that's way too complicated. So we're going to make something stupid for you people. Like, one of the most insulting things I think about this movie is that they constantly cut back to the original movies.
Mhm.
Like, they'll show a shot, and the shot's obviously a reference to the original films, but they don't leave it at that. They then cut to the original films in case you stupid viewer forgot that the original films did this too. Like,
Yeah.
I find it extremely condescending, actually, that they.
It's like, yeah, we've seen the movies when a dude shouts out, Mr. Anderson, we don't need a split shot of Agent Smith. We got it, man. We know what you're talking about. Don't worry, we get it. We
Yeah,
know what's happening. Yeah.
yeah. I think we remember Mr. Anderson and Mr. Smith. Like that's a pretty big part of the story.
Yeah, yeah. How's
And
the bit with the fake he says like at last or something like that, and then he just does this weird little comedic quip thing about, he goes, oh, should I have gone with that version or should I go with this version? It reminds me of like the Fight Club thing when he's like, do I give you the ass or the crotch? Like when he's on the plane.
yeah,
It's like what really odd writing.
Yeah, and I don't have anything against the new actors. The guy who plays Morpheus, uh, I haven't seen it. I think I've seen him in like a couple other things. I think he was in the Watchmen show and a couple other things. I don't have anything personal about him, but he is not Morpheus. He is not Morpheus in
Mm.
this film. He is very goofy. Just the whole opening, like they try to set up a couple. I'm trying to really dig deep into this film and see what kind of themes they're attempting to do in this film. And one of the things is they're kind of almost like damage controlling some of the criticisms of the original film. Like one of the recurring lines in this Resurrections was, "You call this a choice?" Like within 5 to 10 minutes of Bugs, the main character, basically is um, hands the this agent, apparently an active agent, a red pill, and the agent happens to say that he's Morpheus, and immediately he's like, "Oh, Morpheus, hug." It's like, "Oh, this guy was trying to shoot you 3 seconds earlier, and you now trust him because he says the name Morpheus." Like that seems like a pretty big stretch. Uh, and,
Yeah.
and like she hands him a pill. It's like, "You should take this," and it's like, "You call this a choice?" And it's like, okay, if you're criticizing the original film, which by the way actually had a choice, Neo could have taken the blue pill and lived his life out in bliss,
Mm.
but they're trying to like address that criticism by giving no choice whatsoever. And it just seems like a very kind of childish way of addressing a potential flaw of the original movies. Like that's kind of a big deal when Neo chooses to go down the rabbit hole rather than just stay in blissful ignorance. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of looked at it in the sense of like, but Neo had always, like you said, for him it had been like the splinter in his mind, right? That kind of thing that just been haunting him his whole life. Like he knew something was wrong.
Yeah.
Um, Whereas I kind of looked at that again. It is one of the few things I think it does well and wrong in Resurrections is how it's like it is a more advanced version of the Matrix. So it's like they've got it to the point now where they've kind of tweaked it to the point where yeah, like no one really wants to leave anymore. Wasn't there a line where they talked about how they don't really have many red pills anymore? Do you know what I mean? Like people just don't want to leave as much. So I don't know. Like I kind of thought it was a cool way to have a different approach to it in the sense of I don't know, like maybe the way that people react to potentially getting out of it now is a little bit different. And I actually think the concept of like programs having empathy for humans again, like it's one of the few things I liked about it. It just never developed it any further, man. Like there's that one scene where they have like the what do you call it, like the nanobite person or whatever it is, who's kind of like helping out in like that weird like greenhouse or something. Like I thought that
Yeah.
stuff was cool, but it just never explored it any further than that, you know?
Yeah. The In the future, 60 years in the future, the humans in the real world have learned to work with the more benevolent machines, which is interesting.
Yeah. Because
The
they're
AIs.
self-learning AI. They would have to like the AI would have to learn empathy. If they're at the point now where they're self-aware and they obviously have disdain for humans, like if Smith, even if as far back as Smith, if his AI was able to sort of hate someone, then there must be the other side of the equation where they can have affection for humans and sympathy and empathy. So I thought that was the one of the coolest things. Yeah.
Yeah, I was down for that. I just didn't like how they got there and how they did nothing with it. Like in the end, they it's almost like a fourth wall breaking self-aware admission that they had no good big new big idea. Like they even say it in the
Mm.
dialogue where it's like, "You know what people loved about Matrix? Bullet time, bullet time, bullet time. We
Oh
need a
fuck.
new bullet time." And it's just like,
Yeah.
okay, cool. You're now really treading on dangerous ground by breaking this much fourth wall and being this self-aware. I hope you have a really good idea in your back pocket. Nope. So basically, they've admitted that they have no new big idea, uh, and that makes up for the fact that they don't have a big idea somehow. Like if they're aware that they have no new ideas, but
How's
like
about how she like convinces Neo to finally come along with him just because she's got a white rabbit tattoo? Remember that scene? She's like, "If this
yeah,
doesn't convince you, how about this?" And she like lifts the thing up,
I
and he's like,
know.
"Sure, okay," like straight away because he sees that, you know.
Yeah,
Well, that's the final piece of the puzzle. All right, you got me.
I've heard a lot of criticisms about people going back and said, "Oh, The Matrix was never good. First film was super on the nose and stuff like that." And I can see some of the arguments, but things this movie makes the first movie seem like super subtle. Like there's obviously a, li- you know allegories and Like at the beginning when the guy gets the disc from Neo and buys it from him, is like, "You're my savior, man. You're my personal Jesus Christ." It's like
Yeah.
that's on the nose, but I could see somebody saying that. It's like, "Oh, you're my savior, man." I've actually heard people say that, you know. So like, it's not too bad. Oh God, okay, we shouldn't have this. Had the nude scenes on this video. Uh, um, but yeah, I know
But
yeah,
that's the thing. But it's like it uses it to get you there at the start, but it never felt like it was going back there constantly. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
Like, I mean, the Alice in Wonderland references are pretty cool, but like they're not super subtle. But once you get to the point where it serves the story, like it's not like it ever really comes back in like an obnoxious way, kind of thing.
yeah. No, it's not really really obnoxious or if you know the reference, you get the reference, but it's not like it's not a groan inducing thing. You know,
Mm,
it doesn't make you groan like some of the lines in this new film does. Like, yeah, for example, we need a new bullet time, all these kind of things. But I just it tries to like the first scene is just so hectic. I didn't know what I was trying to feel. Like, okay, she's basically, you know what I thought about the very first scene with Bugs, the blue haired girl, and then
Morpheus.
basically recreating and the before that even just like
Oh,
recreating
Trinity
the
scene. Yeah, yeah.
yeah I imagined it. It was like watching a let's play of a movie
Well,
where
this is the bit where she does this. Yeah.
yeah, she was like commenting on like a let's play of like gameplay or whatever. It's just like, wow, this is, you think you're so clever and so interesting and so meta, but I just really
Mm,
can't get into this. And they get right to trusting this agent that was trying to shoot them a couple of minutes ago, and because off screen he had a revelation. And
yeah,
again, some interesting things like that scene where he was looking into the mirror and he sees the code very subtly. I'm like, that's a cool effect. Good job, CG guy.
yeah.
But yeah, no good ideas to back it up. And yeah, if they focused on the sort of hybridization or the collaboration between humans and machines in the real world, that'd be interesting. But they completely dropped that after like the halfway mark, it seems.
Yeah, they had a cool scene where he said something like, "How can we trust these machines?" And she goes, "Well, this was the one that basically saved you from your pod, and its code's been exiled or something now. So if it ever goes back, it'll just be destroyed on sight." And I was like, "That's a cool concept." You know, they somehow had like an infiltrator that was helping them get people out, and now that thing's played its final card, so that thing can't use it anymore. And it was like a pet almost, like they were like patting it and stuff like this. So I
Yeah,
was like, yeah, I mean, if you're gonna go anywhere, that's a cool way to extend what you've already explored. I thought the scene too when the Morpheus dude is like kind of breaking himself down and sneaking into the thing was like one of the best scenes in the movie because it actually had like kind of tension too when they were trying to sneak in. Like it wasn't just relying on some stupid old shit. Like this was new stuff, seeing this kind of new creature sort of make his way around. It wasn't just
yeah.
treading the same ground.
I hate to say it, but this Matrix film is the best parts are probably outside of the Matrix, which normally is the
Mm,
opposite, you know. But I kind of agree
yeah.
with you. Like the world building, like I would have liked to learn what kind of happened with the world and stuff beyond revolutions and what Neo's sacrifice meant to everybody and everything like that. But it was weirdly like small scale. I'm almost wondering if it was
Gonna say that, yeah. Like
it,
it's the Zion or the new Zion or whatever is like a bazillion times bigger, but you literally see like four people walking around the whole city in that whole
yeah.
time, right?
I'm almost wondering if
Like, where is everyone?
like did like COVID make it so they couldn't have big crowds or something? Like I don't want to give excuses to this movie, but at the same time, it seemed like there was some restriction because the sets were very small. There you saw four of them,
Mm.
and yeah,
Oh, but they had like 100 people at the end, like all the people running through the streets, and the dudes in the cafe, like that. I think that was just a room full of actors, so I don't think COVID was to blame for that.
yeah, I get the idea that this was shot a while ago, so I don't.
How's that Christina Ricci is in one scene for all of 10
Isn't
seconds? You've
that
got Christina
weird?
Ricci, and she shows up for like literally 10 seconds, and she never comes back. Like what?
Yeah, there were so many. There's just so many starts but not finishes. Like almost nothing gets paid off in this film.
Mm.
Uh, Not even the recurring line, the you call that a choice kind of thing. It's just kind of, I guess maybe at the end is like there was never a choice or whatever. I don't know. Very frustrating because nothing quite gets paid off. It's just a bunch of like miniature ideas and setups. And I mean, one of the Wachowskis just left the project and didn't want anything to do with it. They didn't weren't
Yeah.
interested in it, which kind of says a lot.
The rumor is too that Lawrence Fishburne, I was reading that they both read the scripts and they both just didn't like the script, so that's why they didn't return. I think they dodged a bullet on that one.
Yeah, I mean, canonically, I guess I think that Morpheus, because he's dead in this, they only get him back through an AI replica of him. I think he dies
Mm.
in the Matrix Online. I think that's the canon.
Oh, he does, yeah. He gets
Which,
killed by this weird looking like Agent 3.0 or something. Like some
yeah,
weird creature kills him. Yeah.
which is spoiler unless you watch the latest movie and you find out, oh wow, Morpheus died in a video game. Okay.
Yeah, but the actual I looked up the cinematic on YouTube, and it's exactly what you would expect for a cinematic using an in-engine,
Oh
like an
God.
MMO in-game engine. It's so funny, man. I guess if you're into the series at the time, maybe the weight of it would be good, but yeah, it's not great.
Yeah, I don't. I think Morpheus has earned something than an in-game cutscene death. I think that's a
Yeah, in
little
Matrix
disrespectful.
Online, it probably had about 13 people playing it at the time that were actually subscribed to it. But yeah, anyway.
Yeah, I watched some clips of Matrix Online, and I guess when they finally took it down, they made an in lore event that basically took the Matrix offline.
Oh, there you go.
So you got it actually was kind of cool looking. Everybody kind of disappeared into code. So it was kind of a cool idea that they actually put the effort in to end the game gracefully, but I never got to
Mm,
play it. It just really had that sort of 2000s MMO look and feel to me, which I wasn't super interested
yeah,
in. But
yeah.
yeah, no, I don't know what to say about this movie, but yeah, meta, self-referential, tongue-in-cheek, uh, and yeah, the I didn't expect them to. I saw the trailer for Resurrections and how they cut back and forth between Matrix One and the new movie. It's like, oh, that's kind of interesting. They kind of did that with the Star Wars trailer to kind of get people hyped about the new movie by referencing the old movie. I had no idea that they were actually going to do that in the actual film. That was insane to me.
Yeah,
Just
well, you kind of saw it, and you're like, okay, well, that's just to generate hype, and that's kind of to just kind of, I don't know, get you enticed to see the film. But the fact that it played such a huge part overall was definitely, it's blindsided, man. The way that how much they rely on the old stuff.
yeah, like there's one scene where the new Morpheus is literally projecting the original Morpheus scene onto a
Ugh.
wall, and
Yeah.
then and they get it.
But
Why
that's from
can't
the game, man. That's from the game.
it's from the
Don't
game,
forget, okay?
man?
Yeah, it's not
Yeah,
from the movie. It's from the game. The best game ever made. From one of the greatest game developers of all time.
yeah.
So
It's so weird. I had no expectations, but my expectations were still too high on that movie. It's just such a
I kind of
weird.
hate. I hate the thing where it's like, oh, now we can just jack in anywhere and we can just go here and there. There's no threat. It's like just remove one of the greatest limitations those guys had in that first film. Remember, it's like, hey, they
Oh
cut the
yeah,
hard line. Okay, well, we're fucked. Now we have to drive on a freeway that's like a giant fucking death corridor. It's
yeah,
like, no, we can just like transport to Tokyo now, man. Just walk through this door and we're in an entirely different city. Like, just downplay the whole threat level of their whole existence.
yeah. You would think that the creator of the Matrix, their most defining work, would remember one of the most important rules is that actually was the entire point of the tension of the first film is that if you unplug without a proper exit terminal, you
Hardline.
would
Yeah.
die. Yeah,
Yeah,
hardline,
you're
you would
fucked.
die. And
Yeah.
but yet we see that multiple times where they jack Trinity out and put bugs in and put jack bugs out and put Trinity in for some reason. I have no idea why they did
Yeah,
that at
I
the
didn't
end,
understand. Yeah, I didn't get that bit either. Yeah.
but like that was their solution, and like that was all because it's a little bit of lore, and you don't it's like backed up by two lines in the original movie, but basically when you exit the Matrix, you are no longer connected to the Matrix in any way, shape, or form. They have
Mm.
to bring their hover ships out and essentially get close enough to the Matrix mainframe to then to basically project a wireless pirate signal. That's what they call it, a pirate signal
Yeah.
back into the Matrix. So they're basically using Matrix Wi-Fi. That's how they get back into the Matrix. But
Yeah.
when they're in, they have to find an exit within the Matrix to get out, and they completely remove that sort of limitation to very troubling results in this new film.
At a bit at the end when like the people are trapped in the car and they're getting attacked, and it's like, oh my god, someone's gonna die, and they're like, quick, get us in there, and then they just like in straight away and save them like instantly. And it's
Yeah,
like, oh, okay,
yeah.
there goes that tension.
It was also kind of a weird visual idea. I don't know if I hated it, but it was odd that they now show that the operators in the Matrix, right? They kind of have like a projection of themselves that only the red pills can see. That was kind of a weird change, right? I thought that was
Yeah,
kind of odd.
they've got like Oculus Rift headsets now where the guys can go in and play with them. Yeah,
Yeah. I kind of always like the sort of banter and the chatter between the operator in the real world and the red pills in the Matrix, because that was kind of an interesting little, back and forth between reality and the Matrix. I thought that was kind of cool. But when they put them in the Matrix, I don't know. Like there's also something that I wanted to bring up about the color of the movie. Um, People talk about how the Matrix is green or whatever. I think that the color of the Matrix versus the real world, green and blue, that was actually pretty cool in that you had a distinct line between reality and the fake world basically. But they
yeah,
completely kill any sort of color scheme in Resurrections. Now, I didn't like that because that kind of takes away a lot of the style and look of the movies. It didn't feel like a Matrix movie at all, from the visual
mm,
standpoint at least. But they could have done something clever where people no longer can tell the difference between reality and the Matrix, i.e., you could have multiple levels of the Matrix and you wouldn't have to do the color coding thing anymore. But they don't do that.
yeah.
It's still very clear when you're in and when you're out.
Yeah, look, it like again, like, and it kind of it touches into the whole thing where it just kind of feels like it was a movie made by someone who doesn't get the Matrix, and
Yeah.
the saddest part about that is that it was made by the Wachowskis or a Wachowski, and it's like it just shouldn't have. It felt like a fan film. I think I said that to my partner at one point when we were watching it, and I just turned to her and I said, like, this is like a fan film, like, the bit when they're in the bathroom, like I said, and he's chatting to Morpheus is chatting to Neo, and they're like, "I gotta hack the mirror," and he does the mirror thing where the mirror goes wobbly. Like, it's like this is what like a fan comes up with when they write their own fan fiction. Like, Morpheus, second version of Morpheus finally meets Neo, and then, oh look, Agent Smith comes in, Mr. Anderson. Like, it's what someone would come up with if they're writing their own stupid fan fiction. But
Yeah.
this was like the fourth Matrix film,
I kind of like joke that it's the Wattpad original sequel to the
It's what?
Matrix. Wattpad,
Oh,
it's like the fan fiction website where you can go in and like, right,
yeah, right, yeah,
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 yeah. It's like Wattpad original sequel to the Matrix, and yeah, it definitely feels like that. Like it's got a lot of fan reverence, but also sort of disdain for the series. And I'm like, okay, if you're going to tap into the hype and the excitement and the nostalgia of the Matrix, why do you hate it so much? why why are you trying to break it down so much? Like it's very very odd decision to me. Like I could see a similar setup to this working somehow, but it really has to have a if you're going to bring up the fact that there's no new ideas, you got to have a new idea in your back pocket. You can't just acknowledge you have no new ideas and then just move on and say, "Oh well, I acknowledge it. It's good."
yeah. I mean, I think the concept of I think they explained it where they realized that for some reason they needed Neo and Trinity in the Matrix for some reason to like it like increased productivity or something over the way people reacted to that whatever it was. I think that was kind of a cool idea. So it's like, well, they realized that once those two were gone, um, yeah, they just weren't working on the same level. So that was kind of cool. Like, maybe they just should have maybe built it off that. Like, yeah, they have their memories wiped. These two are together, and they have to figure out a way to get them their memories back. But the whole meta thing was just what really killed it, because it really was. People joke about it, and you hear that like Member Berries thing said a lot, but this really was like the Member Berries film, man. It was just so obnoxious, and that's coming from, like I said, like a dude who saw that original film like 3 times in a weekend and was obsessed with it as a teenager. And it's like, I hated this movie. I thought it just felt like disrespectful in a sense.
Yeah, and even for its flaws, I think that the Spider-Man movie that just came out recently was polar opposite in that it had the Remember Berry
100%.
stuff, but
Yeah.
it actually respected the source material. I'd actually argue that the new Spider-Man film made the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man films better just by like paying
Hundred
off.
percent. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, and it kind of gave those characters like their vindication in a sense.
yeah,
Like, spoilers obviously, but Toby got to see Doc Ock, getting his humanity back and that part of him back. Garfield got to get that kind of redemption from Saban. That version of MJ from falling to her death kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like it brought them back and it expanded upon what it had. It wasn't just like, hey, remember that time you danced like a weirdo in a black suit? Like it just didn't. I'm surprised they didn't kind of do that, to be honest, and have Tobey Maguire doing the dance. But maybe they kind of knew that was the limit. Like if they go that far, that's probably too far into the member berries.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely not to get on a Spider-Man review, but they definitely had some memes from there. Like they did, like, "Oh, my back's really hurting me," because like
I love that. Yeah, that was great.
it's like okay, you're getting into the memes now, or like hey, no, Spider-Man, you are amazing, you are
Yeah, you're
amazing,
amazing.
and it's like okay, yeah, you're really walking the line there, but the
I like the
payoffs.
rhinoceros suit line. That was my favorite. When he's like, I fought a guy in a rhinoceros machine. That was the
Yeah,
best.
probably the best referential thing was that I remember liking was how'd you get your superpowers? Like, I fell into a vat of electric eels. Like, how'd you get your powers? Like, I fell into a super collider. Man, got to be careful what you fall into.
Yeah. Like, dang you gotta watch where you fall.
It's like acknowledging something silly, but also acknowledging that actually happened. It's like, man, that's
Yeah.
dangerous. It's like you're self-referential to a point where it's funny, but it doesn't ruin the universe necessarily.
Yeah.
That they're just
Yeah.
acknowledging that this kind of thing is a little silly. But
Mm.
there's again that filter that wasn't there with Resurrections that it really needed to be there. There needed to be somebody say like, Wachowski, I think that's a little too far. We need
It's exactly what it didn't have. I think it was just to the point where they're like, hey, look, reboots and sequels are what makes money. Everyone's just gonna watch this no matter what. Just do anything you want. And like the script would have probably been in development for years. I reckon they would have been working on it for ages. So yeah, I just think it was a blank check to make a Matrix movie, and this is exactly what happened.
Yeah, and I had to actually pause, turn on subtitles, and rewind because when they did bring the Merovingian back,
Oh God.
I heard something like he's crazy hobo now, I guess, but I heard something and I'm like, did I hear what I thought I heard? And I rewinded it and put subtitles on. He says something along the lines of, "I'll be back for the sequel, or I'll be back for the spin-off franchise."
Yeah, that was ridiculously on the nose. That character, that dude was not taking that scene seriously. I don't know if that was supposed to be comedic, but he was just chewing the goddamn scenery hard.
Yeah, and
I think he took the paycheck and he just acted like, it's like what is it? Jeremy Irons in that Dungeons and Dragons movie. You ever seen
yeah,
that? Like
yeah.
it's that level of performance. Like, yeah, this is the worst script I've ever read. Whatever. Where's my paycheck? And he turned up. He gave it his own, but yeah, he just went 200% over the top.
Yeah, absolutely. It reminds me, I think it was Jaws 3D. Is that the one with Michael Caine? I don't remember, but one of the Jaws sequels, they kind of fallen off the edge of the cliff at that point. But Michael Caine, who respected actor, was in that, and they asked him like, "What was your experience making Jaws 3D?" I think it's 3D, maybe it was 4, but he said, "I don't remember that movie, but I did remember the house it bought," and it's like. Yeah, that's a great answer, actually.
Yeah, that sums it up pretty well. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
exactly what that scene was. It's like, yep, give me the money. How long do you need me? A day? Yeah, cool. All right, what do you need me to say?
yeah.
He's dressed like not even like a hobo. It's like, I don't know if have you ever seen The Mighty Boosh by any chance?
Mighty Boosh. No, I've heard about it. Is it pretty good?
Yeah, you look this scene up then after this, and you'll see I'm talking about. There's a really random scene where one of the characters enters a mirror dimension, and there's a character who's there who's called the Lord of the Mirror Dimension. It's like a dude covered in like kitchen sponges. That's the outfit that the Merovingian's wearing.
I
I was
just
like,
look. I just
it's
looked
not
it
even a
up.
hobo's outfit. Yeah,
Yeah, it's like living trash. Yeah, that's basically
yeah.
how he looked.
Why does he need to dress like that? Like, surely I mean, yeah, your case, everything happened and you lost all your power, but do you really need to dress like that, or you look like you're wearing garbage trash all over your body? I don't know. Very odd. And I don't know if it's supposed to be funny because the fight scene was supposed to be very serious because, Smith turns up and the stakes are high, but then you have this really weird dialogue with that character in the background the whole time.
Yeah, this movie is so weirdly meta and so much. It's built so much like a parody that not only do I have the MTV Movie Awards parody on screen right now, but I also went back and watched the Matrix parody cold open for The Office they did a while back, and I'm not
I
even
remember that.
joking. Did you ever watch it?
Yeah, I've seen The Office. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if it was ever public. It was ever broadcast, but it was like an unbroadcasted thing. You can find it on YouTube. But
Yeah.
essentially, I didn't ever really watch The Office, but I've seen bits and pieces here and there. But I think it's Dwight. I want to say
Yeah.
is
That's it. Yeah.
he's being the others are trying to convince him into thinking he's in the Matrix by like
Oh, okay. Yeah, because he's very gullible. He falls for a lot of stuff in that show. Yeah.
yeah, so like they get like a black cat to run across past his office twice and like
Oh,
twin
deja vu.
yeah
How's
yeah
that with the little deja? Oh God.
yeah like two twins walk by his office and he's like starting to get like phone calls and he gets a cell phone in the mail and stuff, and at the end he's like brought into a warehouse and the guy dressed like Morpheus tells him like that he's in the Matrix so and so, and then but at the end he's like, you know what, I actually like my coworkers. I actually like my job. I want to take the blue pill. I'm actually happy. And then people had like a moving moment. They're like, oh, that's actually kind of sweet. And I'm like,
Yeah.
weirdly enough, a stupid parody in a sitcom treats The Matrix with more reverence than the sequel does. Like,
Mm.
not even joking, not even exaggerating. I think it actually does. It's just
Yeah.
weird when you think about it. That
Mm.
I almost get the idea, and this is kind of just backseat psychology, I guess, or whatever. But I might think that maybe the Wachowskis might kind of hate this what the Matrixes have done because they can never achieve that success again, so they might resent it a little bit. I kind of got that vibe from this movie. It's like,
Yeah, and I mean, every film they've done since has always kind of been compared to it in a sense. Like,
yeah,
I actually really liked Sense8. They made that series, which was pretty interesting. Um, like, I don't know if you've watched it. It's got some pretty decent action in it too, and the concept of it's pretty good. But again, it's one of those shows where, like, I mean, there's literally talking about orgies again. There's like a scene in that where there's like 12 characters at once having an orgy because they're all like connected psychically, even though they're in different countries and all this different
yeah,
stuff. I won't spoil it, but yeah, like you can see when their creative juices like seep back in. This is kind of what they come up with. It's one of those things where maybe, like you say, like again, they've just never had that producer over their shoulder, kind of telling them what they can and can't do. Because it just seems when they had that is what they created the Matrix, and that was like that perfect kind of composition. But everything since yeah, they're just kind of chasing their tails, trying to reach that same level.
yeah. I mean, I've said this before that they've not written anything original uh, that's I've considered good since 2003. Like there's
Yeah,
good aspects of Reloaded and Revolutions, but since then they've done some adaptations since then that were pretty good. Like I liked V for Vendetta. I liked Cloud Atlas. I wasn't too keen on Sense8. I watched about 5 episodes of that, but there were some good ideas in there.
yeah.
Yeah,
Sense8 takes a while to get going. I would actually recommend it. It gets pretty cool once. I think like it has 3 seasons, and the first season's a bit rubbish, but the second season is once it's kind of got its momentum. It's pretty interesting.
yeah, I like the ideas of it. I just thought it was, like you said, very overindulgent in certain points. Like it felt like sometimes a series made by multiple people. It's like sometimes I would switch to another scene. I'm like, whoa, what is this? This is not the same show.
I think it's the yeah. I think it's the most expensive Netflix series of all time too. It cost like it had like a film budget, and I think that's why they canceled it is because it just wasn't they just wasn't justifying, the end result. But yeah, you can kind of see like the rare time when they tried something a bit different, and yeah, it was pretty cool. There was moments in there where you're like, yeah, this is pretty awesome.
Yeah, on the other hand, Jupiter Ascending was pretty much universally despised. It was not a well received movie. Again, had some kind of cool ideas. That the idea that the solar system is sort of like a bureaucratic kingdom, and there's somebody on Earth who doesn't even know that she basically inherited the world. Things like that. Cool
Yeah,
ideas, but then you have crazy stuff that again, no filter. There should have been somebody who said, hey, no, don't do that. It actually reminds me a lot
yeah,
of like George Lucas's latest later career, in that he had some great ideas, but he needed a filter. Even the first movie got a major re-edit later on and fixed a lot of its problems and became the film we all know and love. But later on, he was the big head honcho, and he could make all the final decisions. They
yeah.
were building sets and filming and basically well into production before he gave him his first draft of the script. That's how crazy the production for the prequels were.
Yeah, yeah. There's behind the scenes stuff where he's like, "Oh my god, like I haven't even finished the script, and you've
Yeah.
finished this." It's like that's not the way it should be, George.
No, no, you should have a revised script before you do any of that stuff, George.
Yeah, but one of my favorite memes is that like it's like poetry it rhymes. You know that meme that
Yeah,
came out of
yeah,
that whole thing? That's like my favorite. Whenever people use that, it's like poetry it rhymes. It's like
yeah,
no, no, it's not.
yeah, yeah. The poetry it rhymes like, or how what's that character that everybody hated? The rabbit guy,
Oh,
Jar Jar
Jar Jar
Binks.
Binks.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like Jar Jar Binks is the key to all of this. He's the funnier character than we ever had before.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
the first time they watched the first cut of Phantom Menace, everybody's like on the border of tears
Yeah, they were just like they're shell shocked, like staring at the screen. Yeah.
and George was like, I may have gone too far in a couple places.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like it's great meme material, but I'm
Yeah.
so glad they have it on camera. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's a kind of a problem that I think that creators need to be challenged. They need to have somebody to bounce ideas off, and sometimes those ideas need to be killed. I mean, you see seeds of good ideas in all their works, but at the same time, without that filter to kind of strain out the bad ones, unfiltered Wachowski is a nightmare. At least
Yeah.
what I've seen. So
No, that you're not wrong. Yeah, and this is like the magnum opus of what happens when they have full creative control with and again like maybe it just is like the victim of the COVID thing because obviously they would have been shooting straight through like the prime time when that was all happening, but there's just too many creative decisions in there that would be bad no matter what kind of climate you were shooting in, you know. And it's just a shame, you know. It was just the small things for me too. Like you know, there's that one scene where they like keep was it they keep Neo hostage or not hostage, but they kind of like lock him up in this like I guess it's a prison cell, but it's a prison cell that has a veranda that just opens to like
yeah,
nowhere. It's like, dude, like it's just even in Reloaded and Revolutions, I don't think they ever just had dumb basic logic things like that. Do you know what I mean?
no, yeah, it's like everybody's an idiot, and it's just also it's just a very unsatisfying movie. Like the cardinal sin of action movie is to be unsatisfying. Like there isn't
Yeah.
really any good action that I to speak of. The camera
No.
work is very messy.
Mm. I mean, the biggest action scene in the film was really the bit that we were just talking about, where the Merovingian turns up, and I couldn't remember anything from the whole fight. Like there was no memorable hits or anything. And like on paper, you'd read it and go, "Oh, there's like a fight here with like you know a dozen people at once," and that should technically be an exciting fight scene. But the fight scene of Neo versus Smith in the first film, one person versus 1v1, is infinitely more interesting because you can follow everything that's happening and you can see the time they've spent in learning the moves and the choreography and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, it's a mess. It's just like visual diarrhea, that whole fight scene. There's people getting kicked through walls and all this stuff happening, and then the Merovingian in his little trash outfit says something stupid. It's a disaster.
Yeah, it only gets kind of visibly clear what's happening when he falls through and then starts fighting Smith one on one. And it's like, okay, I can at least see what's going on now. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's good. It's basically a poor imitation of the subway fight in one. So it's just like if you have nothing new to bring to the table and you can't even mimic the original film all that well, which by the way still looks great. It still, a couple CG effects aside, still perfectly holds up. Why bother going to this new one when you can get a better version that people can get on DVD or Blu-ray for $5? But
Yeah. Do you think his little wall is a bit funny, when he does like the Trinity wall run when he's fighting the Smith guy? I don't know if you remember it, like if you've got it, like if you got a clip of it, but he doesn't like when Trinity runs up the wall, she runs up the wall. When Neo does this like 360 spin, he stays in place, but he like rotates around the wall to do like a roundhouse kick or something. It looks so bad. I don't know if you remember that one shot, but if you've still got a copy of the movie, just check that one shot out and you'll see what I mean.
yeah,
It's
I'll
just
have
like he
to,
literally like floating in spot, does a 360, and he's like kind of like barely touching the wall to get momentum, and then he does this kick. It's pretty bad.
yeah, I have the scene up right now. It's the fight with him and Smith. You said,
Yeah, when they break through into the basement, and then he does
yeah,
like it was in the trailer too. I remember that's the first time I saw it, and I was like, oh, that didn't look very good.
and it was like that's a good move or whatever. He blocks.
Yeah, it's copying the Trinity move that she does when she runs up
Okay,
the
that was
wall.
earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, that whole scene. That's just basically a copy and paste from the first Morpheus and Agent Smith fight.
Yeah. In the bathroom. Yeah.
Yeah, and combined a little bit with the subway fight. I just
Yeah. I think yeah, he rips off a sink, I think, at one
yeah.
point and goes to bash him over the head.
Yeah, okay. So I've got that scene up, and he's like crawling, and he's about to hit him with a sink, and he's taunting him for some reason. And then one of the weird things I didn't bring up is that Smith just kind of leaves at one point. I
I
don't
think he
know.
punches him through the wall and then he just doesn't bother coming out of the wall, right? Like he just vanishes at that point. He's
Yeah,
like, oh, all right, see you later.
yeah,
I
he
have to
just
go home now. My
vanishes.
planet needs me.
Yeah, I think that's he does like this his force power thing or to get rid of Smith somehow, but yeah,
He's
there
force
was
push.
yeah. Yeah, I just was amazed that just Smith just decides to walk away from that, even though they don't actually leave the building. And then because there's always that really kind of suspension of disbelief in the original films, in that once you kill the agent's host, they have to find another one. So
Yeah.
you bought a little time, but we don't have that with this one. As far as we know, Smith is only one body, so
Yeah.
it doesn't really have that excuse in this one. So it's pretty odd. But yeah, no, there's a lot of I can't find the scene, but yeah, I'm just overall didn't have a great time with the movie. Very frustrating. Very after all this time too. Like even if it was a really shallow, feel good return to the Matrix, like oh Neo's living the blue pill life, and then Trinity comes back and says Neo you're bigger than this. You're the one. And it's like no I'm not. And then like they do the pill thing again, and basically retread the first movie just like they did with Star Wars Force Awakens, but had a stupid but satisfying conclusion. I wouldn't
Mm.
have hated it this much. I don't
Yeah,
know.
but it's just like a what's the word? Like it's everything is just done worse than it should be. Like even down to that like cover of like Rage Against the Machine for the end credits. I don't know who the band is, and it's not like an attack on that band, but that is a dreadful cover
Oh
of an
yeah,
awesome song. Everything about it is just like you say, like it's replicating all this stuff, but it just does everything worse. The guy who plays the Morpheus character. He's not a bad actor. He's not. He just can't hold a candle to Lawrence Fishburne. The dude who plays Smith, who I actually really like, he's in that
oh I love that guy. He's in
Mindhunter, which is like the best TV series ever, man. Like that's a series I'd love to see turn into an actual film. But like, he's a cool actor, but he's just not a good Smith. Like everything is just a worse off version of what it should be. Even like Keanu Reeves and Carrie Ann Moss, like they just weren't really very good in their own characters that they created. You know?
yeah. It's a shame because I love that actor. I don't remember his name right now, unfortunately, but I love Mindhunter. It's a shame that got canceled after 2 seasons. But
Yeah. Especially the way they were setting it up for the whole BTK thing in the next season. It would have been awesome.
yeah, no, it'd have been incredible. But
Mm,
it's such a shame. I think he could have pulled off an agent like character or Smith. You don't necessarily have to bring Smith back, but they could bring some sort of agent character in there, and he'd been fine. But
yeah.
he was given such crap material and he to work with. He just didn't seem threatening, and they dressed him up like kind of metro and like had loafers on and stuff. It's like this isn't threatening.
And then he's like his ally at the end. He turns up once and he's like, "Oh, temporary alliance or something like
yeah,
this." So
yeah,
now
something
he's a
terrible
good
like that.
guy.
Yeah, he's like
Oh.
our temporary alliance is about to end here. Let me go away, and it's just it's really just kind of sad and doesn't really have much of a point.
It's always my go-to for that type of thing is like I said that Simpsons meme with Pookie, and it's like Pookie has to go home. I have to go home now, and it's just like the character just leaves the scene. Like that's what it always reminds me of.
Yeah,
It's like Pookie went back to his home planet and died along the way, or whatever it was.
yeah, it's yeah. This was a movie that was made before they had the idea for it. Like
Yeah.
they didn't have the concept for a sequel, but they made a movie anyway. It's pretty much how I felt about it. They just
Yeah. My takeaway, like I said, I think I mentioned it before, but it felt like they must have said, okay, well, look, we've made this many films or we've done all this. That hasn't really been successful. Reboots and remakes are popular right now. John Wick. Keanu Reeves is pretty popular again with the Wick films. Video game culture's at an all-time high. Blah blah blah. Let's just make another Matrix film, and that's basically what they happened, and that's what we got. And it seems like I mean we're not alone in our sentiments. Like the movie is bombing at the box office, which obviously COVID has a part in that. But I mean the Spider-Man film's doing stupid numbers. So that's
Yeah.
obviously not limiting it on, and like you say, that's the polar opposite of that kind of member berries thing done properly and done in like a wholesome way, like respecting the material. Whereas this just feels like it's leeching off the original. Yeah, that's my biggest takeaway, man. You know.
Yeah, and like it's great that we got a really good example of Remember Berries versus a really bad example because, like, yeah, Spider-Man did. I not everything was perfect. Some scenes that should have worked for me didn't, but the tributes to Toby and Andrew's Spider-Man were excellent. I thought they were really really well handled, and
Yep.
they help course correct both of those franchises which had poor endings. You know, not many people liked Spider-Man 3. Not many people liked how the Amazing Spider-Man ended out. But they both kind of improved those franchises, which is very difficult to do.
Yeah, I
uh,
mean to get validation for the main character of the film itself, or to get him resolution is one thing, but to do it for two other, like literal just side characters who don't really have any like main stakes in the main plot was pretty impressive.
yeah, no, I definitely hats off to I forget his name, but I keep on thinking Mark Webb because he's the Amazing Spider-Man director. I swear they hired him because his name was Webb, but
Yeah.
yeah, the MCU director and the writers they did a pretty good job with that, and I was very impressed at how well that they handled that. So yeah,
Mm.
just yeah, unfiltered. I don't know. Some people are in the comments were claiming that this was like the suits had control of this one. I don't think so. I think that
No, I don't agree at all. No.
this is way too meta and risky to be a
Yeah.
studio film. I think.
Yeah, no, it's again, like we've said it numerous times, both of us, but it's Wachowski creative control in full effect, man. Dialed up to 11 is exactly what it is, as far as I'm concerned. And
Yeah,
like I said, having said that, after playing like these Path of Neo games and seeing it again, what they were allowed to do back then with that whole stupid shit at the end of that game, yeah, that's just all it is, you know.
yeah. I'm gonna put this on screen to make people remember. Path of Neo, 2005. Not necessarily. Well, this scene and what leads up to it, like super meta, full of themselves. So if they thought themselves that much clever and meta in 2005, I 100% believe that Matrix Resurrections was their idea, not the
Yep.
studios. So, or at least the one that worked on the film. The other one bailed. But yeah, no, it's just
The thing is, just too, is that Keanu Reeves is just always said to be such a cool dude, like an amicable guy who's not like a shit stirrer. So if that you're going to approach anyone with a script for a new film like that he was in, 20 years ago, whatever, he's the dude who's going to jump at it. Yeah, cool. That sounds awesome, man. I'd love to do that. So it's
yeah,
just the perfect sort of, I don't know, the perfect storm to create it again because you just had that cast of people.
yeah, absolutely. He from everything I've read about him, he's a really respectful, down to earth dude, and he even basically I think he gave up some of his bonus or money from the Matrix trilogy to his stunt crew, and they
Yeah,
actually came back and turned
respect it.
around and made the John Wick films as kind of a like a paying it forward back to him and stuff like that. And it's just like such a wholesome story that he actually cares about the people that he works with, and
Yeah. And that's funny too, is that he's so much more badass in John Wick than he is in this. Like in John Wick, he's I mean, he's not human, but he is human. Like he's a normal dude. He's a cool hitman, but like John Wick would fucking smoke Neo from this new Matrix Resurrections, man. I reckon.
oh yeah, I mean, he also takes quite a beating in that, especially in the second and third John Wick movie. Uh,
Yeah,
but yeah, no, John Wick is cool. He's collected. He's methodical, and it's the same actor, pretty much same age. He can do something with given the right material in the right direction. So,
mm,
no idea what happened there. I mean, John Wick films are definitely made by uh, kind of stunt action coordinators. So that's its focus. They know exactly what to do. You know, the plot is basically secondary to the action, and that's what kind of makes them so great. In that they know that in the end, as long as they deliver a satisfying action movie, they've succeeded. But I don't think that Resurrections even gets close to being satisfying on an action level either.
no, no. Like I said, I watched it with my partner, and she's generally she's not a massive movie buff. But the only other time she's ever like, I mean, basically as soon as the credits rolled, she said something to the effect of like, "Well, that was a fucking waste of time," words to that effect. And the only other time she's ever reacted like that at the end of a film was at the end of Rise of Skywalker, which I also
Oh
think is
God.
one of the worst movies ever made. So yeah, and I'm not like using her as a basis for how to grade a film, but for me, that's how I just know this movie was bad. It kind of validates all my opinions when my partner, who just really couldn't care less and is generally pretty easily entertained, was just like, this was just like terrible, like that's just how infectious it was of how bad the whole thing was.
Yeah, I have like a soft-spoken friend who's usually very, very kind about criticism about movies, and she was like, "I don't like this movie." So I kind of get the same thing. It's just like, yeah, I don't know who this movie satisfied. Didn't satisfy critics. Didn't satisfy audiences. Like,
Yeah.
usually you expect at least one kind of group to like it. It's been kind of weird. Like either notice that recent movies where critics will like it and audiences will hate it, or the reverse will happen. It's
Yep.
rare
Everyone
when,
hates this.
yeah, everyone hates this one. So I don't know what that says about it.
But I have seen some critics defend it, like saying, "Oh, it's actually like a really good study on trauma and how people deal with trauma." It's like, no, please don't try to squeeze that, blood out of a stone with that bullshit. It's just a bad film.
It
Like
kind of,
people are trying to take like alternate angles of what it's actually trying to do, when I think you're giving it far too much credit.
yeah, there's some weird articles. People, I don't know if they're just trying to get hate clicks or what, but like I remember one of them, which was one of the stupidest article titles I've ever read, which was like, the Cowboy Bebop Netflix adaptation wasn't supposed to be good. And you're like,
Oh
what?
yeah, that was a classic one. Yeah. No, they wanted to make it terrible. Okay, guys, cool. Yeah.
Yeah, everybody sets out to make a terrible film or a terrible show.
Yeah. All right. I mean, you could talk about that for hours. I watched one episode of that, and that was enough. I was like, no, I'm not going to subject myself to this.
Yeah, my favorite is that when somebody took like the one of the opening scenes of them talking in the bar and to Seinfeld music, and it feels like a sitcom.
I haven't seen that. I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, it was something like you know, I think what was it? Not Spike, the other Jet was saying something about a bidet, and it's like
Yeah.
on putting a bidet on his foot or whatever, and it's like you're supposed to put that on your on your, not on your feet, on your. And it's like ba-do 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 do 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 do. Just like the little Seinfeld tune.
Yeah. I'm a bit of a Seinfeld nut, so I'll have to look that one up. That sounds
Yeah,
funny.
it's funny. But anyway, dude, unless you wanted to shoot about anything else, Matrix or otherwise, or talk about your projects or anything like that, I totally up to you. I didn't want to keep you for too long, because I know you don't do too many podcasts, but the floor is yours.
No, I mean, I think we pretty much covered it all, man. Yeah, it's just, yeah, it's sad, isn't it, seeing one of your sort of favorite, well, not even favorite, but just like a franchise that you've kind of played such a big part in your life in terms of like development of the type of media that you like to consume. Like I said, like it definitely, like it kind of got me into like anime and not a lot of anime, but even like Hong Kong action films. Like I really got into that side of things after I saw The Matrix for the first time. Do you know what I mean? And it then obviously kind of affected get the games I played, because I love things like Max Payne and yeah. So it's just weird how you don't really think about how like a single film can really affect you like in kind of a profound way in what your interests kind of become when you develop into an adult. But yeah, I just think that makes the whole result of this fourth film that much more disappointing. You know?
Yeah, I kind of had a similar thing. I mean, I think a lot of my tastes were defined by movies like Blade Runner, Matrix, Lord of the Rings, that kind of era. I mean, like Warner Brothers was just like making gold. They signed on the Matrix, they signed on Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter within like a span of 4 years. They were just pumping out hit makers there. But yeah, I know. Matrix was one of probably my favorite film for many years, possibly still. Holds up still. For its flaws, like people argue, like, oh, it'd be better if they just did electric eels instead of humans, maybe. But the point was basically to kind of introduce the concept of, you can be more than what you are told you can be. You can break out of the matrix. You can become more powerful than anyone ever admitted you could be. Don't just absorb the lies that people spread, or the prison of your mind that you've been placed into, and that you can do great things. Like that kind of message resounds with everybody. So I think that it's still an amazing film that also is both superficially really enjoyable with the special effects and the action, but also has some interesting, doesn't get too deep into them, but has some interesting themes and philosophy behind it as well. I think it's a great mix.
Yeah, no, I agree. And then just the way it's kind of like enveloped out into, well, not enveloped, I mean like spread out into the gaming culture and stuff, for better or worse. But yeah, it's had a profound effect on everything. And I mean, the fact we're still talking about those, sequels and that now is somewhat of a testament to them, I suppose, as crappy as they are. But yeah, no, it's good to have vindication at least and to chat about it and just to know that I'm not the only one who's, sort of had that kind of relationship with it over the years, I think.
Yeah, I think if anything, this is just gone. This new movie has gone to just vindicate the original film, because I see tons of people talking about how great the original movie is again. I'm like, it took two mediocre sequels and one terrible sequel to make people realize the original's still great. Because
Yeah, I'll defend that first movie so much. Like I said, my
yeah,
mate recently who was like, "Oh, that movie's aged so badly. It's like so 90s," and I'm like, "Dude, it's timeless. Like, because it's not even it doesn't have like a date set to it. It's just sort of its own thing, set somewhere, in the distant future. And then I think like that whole like premise, man, of machines rising up, like that's not that whole thing isn't going anywhere, dude. That's still like a lingering threat, right? The whole AI
absolutely.
thing. That's
Yeah,
not going anywhere. That's just going to get more and more scary the closer we get to it.
yeah. I mean, as all sci-fi does, the final result of the real world is usually different than how reality does it. But there's tons of things that have been kind of prophesied in sci-fi that have come into reality just in a different form. Like, I don't think that machines are going to rise up and imprison us all, but there is a absolutely real threat of machines replacing blue collar jobs. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So like that could become its own thing where you have robots doing all everybody's jobs. People become unemployed. They can't take care of themselves, or they just become aimless and purposeless and start. Yeah, society degrades. Like all that stuff is absolutely a real thing that could happen, and people like Elon Musk have talked about it. That it's a kind of an inevitability at this point. So it's a very interesting concept. How that'll play out in reality, we don't know. But yeah, I mean, AI's not getting any dumber. We'll put it that way.
No, no, definitely not.
So anyway, man, it's been awesome talking to you and sort of in person, live for the first time. But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, we should do this again sometime. I'd be totally down for a Mad Max retrospective at some point. I love those films, and I love the couple good games in there too, officially and otherwise.
Yeah, actually, like it's funny because like I got the YouTube side of things, and I did like a review for the game like years ago. I think it came out like 2015 or something.
I think so. Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I went through a period where I used to review like because I was just trying to rush videos out to get them for launch dates because I didn't have like review codes back then, and I've rushed through Mad Max, and I remember like not liking it, but then I think I went back and replayed it, a couple years later, and I was like, man, this game's actually really good. Once you take the time to like really get into it, and you go driving out in like the wasteland, and you drive through like not thunderstorms, like electrical storms, and that it's like I really started to appreciate that game a lot more. So yeah, I think like that franchise has been pretty fairly, I think, throughout the years.
Yeah. A lot of people kind of have an issue with Thunderdome. I like Road Warrior the best of the original trilogy, but I think that Thunderdome gets kind of poorly treated. I think there's a lot of good things about Thunderdome. There's some silly stuff too, but
I think
Thunderdome
the
is
first
definitely
one's probably the weakest. Yeah, first one is just like because I live in obviously I'm Australian, so like I can recognize like that Australian culture in like the 70s is really cringy to me. I'd say the first one's probably aged the worst, man.
yeah, and I kind of like how each film would kind of retcon the previous one. Like the first one wasn't really even that post-apocalyptic; it was just the outback,
Mm.
pretty much. So like they didn't actually even have necessarily an apocalyptic theme. It was the second one was that solidified that we were in some post nuke world or whatever, but or post collapse world. But yeah,
Yeah, I think the first one was like natural resources were pretty thin at that point. Like
yeah,
gasoline was like a commodity, but it wasn't like full on like post-apocalyptic. Yeah, second one was like, now okay, now we're fucked, basically.
yeah. The first one had working police force. They had like civilization, beach houses,
Yeah.
things like that. The second one is they have the intro where it talks about how oil ran out and people started like society collapsed. I the third one solidifies that actual cities were nuked or destroyed, but the
Mm.
second one it's kind of a different theme for each one, but yeah, it wasn't always necessarily post-apocalyptic. The second and third one really solidify that. But yeah, I'd agree. First one's basically your average revenge thriller. You know, it doesn't really have too much that sets it apart from something that, my family was murdered, I get revenge, kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. They
But
actually filmed it near where I live too. Like literally, the place they filmed it isn't there anymore because it's all been turned into construction, like apartments and houses and stuff. But yeah, they filmed it down the beach near where I live, so I could still go down there to that spot. There's like a scene where Max was hanging out with his wife, and a few of those scenes, yeah, right near my house. So it's pretty cool seeing it up there on the movie for this random, cult film that hasn't aged all that great in retrospect.
yeah, yeah, it is cool seeing movie places and in reality. Like when I went to LA, I recognized a couple theaters that people shoot in front of a couple times.
Mm.
But yeah, I don't live near any right now. Live anywhere near anything that's very popular. I think that Morgan Freeman shot a couple films in my city that I'm in now right now, but like other than that, it's not really memorable. But that's cool that you live near Mad Max stuff. I know Australia is huge, so I would never expect you to be anywhere near where they shot, but that is pretty neat that you are.
Oh, well, dude, to talk about the Matrix, like the first one was shot in Sydney. Half the shots in that film, the literally the block around the office I used to work at when I had my first video editing job.
Yeah,
Like the shot when they come out of the sewers when they've just escaped from the hotel, when just before Cypher like betrays him, and the bit when Neo's running away from the agents and he's on the streets. Half of that is like literally. You can walk out front of my office and you turn your head different, 45 degrees this way, you'll see that spot they shot. It's all in this one block in Surrey Hills.
that's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah, so it's always cool watching it. And I know, yeah, a lot of them. You can actually see my old parking garage where I used to park on my way to work, like in one shot.
yeah, that's super cool. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think that Sydney was a good choice, and not only just from a production standpoint, but also just from it's not a city you see too much in movies, so it kind
mm,
of served as like an interesting like model city that was kind of indistinct. Like people know the Empire State Building, they know famous landmarks in San Francisco and L.A. Very often L.A. because that's where they shoot all these Hollywood movies, but Sydney, I think they specifically didn't try to shoot too many. Obviously, stayed well clear away from the Opera House because that's like the one
yeah,
place that people would recognize. But they try to keep it generic or indistinct enough so that it could be any city, basically, which I thought was really clever.
yeah. I think the Golden Gate's in Resurrections in like one shot. We see the Golden Gate Bridge, and straight away I was like, "Oh, San Fran, okay, ruined, immersion killed. Don't care anymore."
Yeah, because like again, kind of like where we talked about Dark City, the Matrix could be applied to any city. Maybe it is only a city. Maybe metropolitan life in a 1999 city is the perfect prison for your mind. Maybe just that level of technology, that sort of scenery, that sort of advancedness without too much, going too much in the future, too much in the past is perfect. Obviously, it was shot in 1998, so they're going to use modern technology for a basis, but in retrospect, they could have picked any year. In theory, they could have picked
Yeah,
2020 or 1980 or whatever. So I think it's kind of like you said, they do specifically say that the Matrix is set in 1999 in the original, just because that's when the movie was made. But I get the idea that it's like, I think Morpheus says it's like it's the peak of our civilization. So it's like
mhm,
the golden age of just where everything was going just right. And funnily enough, kind of prophetic, 9/11 happened 2 years later. So it might
yeah.
actually have been, who knows? But it's just an interesting little moment of time where everything was tended to go just right. Technology was booming, and people were just kind of uh, invested enough into the world and technology to be happy and contented with their lives and not questioning things. So I think that's perfect.
Yeah, well, I kind of always interpreted it too in the sense of like it wasn't about what we were doing; it was just about the routine. Like because Neo works this like boring cubicle job, and there's even that scene when like he's in his office and he gets the mobile phone, which is like when Morpheus calls him, and people are like, "Oh, there's a mistake there." Like he just sits in front of like a blank computer. But I kind of always thought that that was like the way it was interpreted was just like that the Matrix doesn't care what you do. It's just more like that routine of you're following the rules. It's like, okay, you go to work, you sit in your cubicle for 8 hours, and you go home. Like the fact that the boss like even says to him like, you were late to work today. If this happens again, you know, basically don't come back. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that's just the whole part of that thing was just like we're just programmed to follow the rules and do this, this, and this. And yeah, again, I mean, that's kind of what the subtlety in that first movie just handled so well. When in the fourth movie they spend half the film in a fucking coffee place, like drinking flat whites and cappuccinos. You know what I mean? Like half this, I'll have a muffin with my coffee, and there's like this really weird. Again, going back to it, the little group of gamer devs, man, who sit there having all this wacky dialogue, bro.
Yeah, it just the script for Resurrections thought it was so clever, and that's what makes it so insufferable. When it's not clever, it's actually quite dumb. Like the original movie script actually deserves a lot more credit than it gets for subtle little things. Like I keep on noticing new little hints and foreshadowings here and there. Like just like you said, in the office scene, nobody would even care if he turned on his monitor as long as his boss didn't catch him, whatever. Like he just had to conform to that system. He had to show up to work. They didn't really even care what he did as long as whatever his minimum quota was met, basically.
Yeah.
But that scene is so great. Every single line in that scene is so great because when that postal or UPS or whatever delivery guy comes and gives him that package which has the phone, he asks Thomas Anderson, and this is just after we found out that Keanu Reeves is both Neo, the hacker at night, and Thomas Anderson, the software developer during the day. The delivery guy says Thomas Anderson, and Neo just kind of sighs. That's me. And just like that sort of like disappointed acceptance is just kind of heartbreaking because he's like, yep, I'm just Thomas Anderson. That's who I am. And the subtext of that is just so great because every single time the agents or anybody addresses him, it's Thomas Anderson, Mr. Anderson.
Yeah, Mr. Anderson. Yeah, but, plus he looks completely shocked when he gets a mobile phone because it's not part of the programming.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because obviously they've infiltrated it, and the guy gives him the phone, and he kind of goes, he's like genuinely shocked. He's just like, "What the fuck is this? Like, this is like unheard of that I get a phone at my office." Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a lot of subtle little things like that in there.
Yeah, and I like how the movie acknowledged the unusualness of it all. It's something you don't get very often. I liked how the fact that his computer showed a message on his screen, he acknowledged that's freaking weird. The fact that he got a cell phone delivered and it rings as soon as he opens it, that's super weird. So the movie is acknowledging how strange and uncharacteristically well-timed all this is happening, which I think it can be explained by the fact that they're hacking into the Matrix and doing all this stuff. They can see the code. The operator looks at the code, so he can see a lot more than the average human can see. But I love that they acknowledge how weird it is, and I've watched several other films and things that have that sort of we're living in a simulated reality. Like even Dark City does it. Their 13th Floor, Existence, and even more recently, I think it was Bliss did a similar thing. Lots of different media's tackled it, but the best scene that tackles the acceptance of your world is not real is got to be Keanu Reeves breaking down in the real world. Like he's like his vision's going blurry. He's falling onto his knees. He's spinning, like, and he just throws up and passes out. Like that's what I would expect. Yeah. Get me out of here. Get me out of here. That's a great. That his reaction was perfect there. Like he gets a lot of flack for being very dull, but I think he did really well in this movie.
Yeah.
So,
no, definitely. Definitely agree.
Anyway, this is a great chat, man. Anything relevant or fun that people can look forward to on your channel?
Just I'll be doing that. I'll be putting that Path and Neo video out hopefully tomorrow, if not the day after. So that's and then I'm done with the Matrix for a long, long time. That's all I can say.
Sadly, I think I said on one of my recent tweets, I was like, this killed an already comedic franchise. Like, just it was already like asleep for a long, long time, unconscious, and you just killed it in its sleep. People weren't expecting.
It's weird.
Anything.
It's like you made the joke before about waking up Stanley Kubrick and then killing him again. That's what they just did to this franchise. They woke it up and just killed it straight away. It's like, nice work, guys.
Yeah, I think we could easily just say like, yeah, Matrix was great, started out, and then it got a little weird and kind of bad toward the end, but you can kind of watch what you like, play what you like, and kind of absorb what you like, and you're good. But this one's like reminds us of all the bad that this franchise could have gone toward, and then it's like, goodbye.
It's not. It's very disappointing.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, thanks so much for coming on, and have a great day. It's beginning of your day, so you probably have plenty of plenty of time left. And yeah, thanks so much for coming on. G-Man Lives can be found for any Google search pretty much. And are you working on the Path of Neo review at some point? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm finishing it up now. It's just a matter of yeah, seeing what else I can do to it.
Yeah.
Just to make it a little bit more interesting. But there's so much to say. It's actually like it's taken me so long to get through it because the game is super long. It's you would think it would be a quick sort of thing with being a movie time, but it's like a 15-hour long game, man. It just keeps going.
That's nuts. Yeah, I mean,
And yeah, I'm trying to do comparisons on the recreated movie scenes, which are probably the biggest highlights of the game, like seeing how they've poorly recreated those scenes in a game engine. So that's kind of taken a little bit longer than usual. But yeah, I'm pretty excited about it. I think it'll be a pretty entertaining video.
yeah, I'm looking forward to it because I couldn't get through the whole thing when I played it. It was just too rough. Like between the kind of complicated controls and terrible performance, I had a really hard time with it. But I'm looking forward to your coverage of it. And I love how when everybody was fawning over the Unreal Engine 5 demo that they did for the promotion of the new Matrix movie, I love how you just
Yeah.
grabbed that scene from Path of Neo. It's like, man, these graphics are crazy. That was great.
Yeah, I couldn't resist. It was just like perfect timing that I was like playing it at the time. I was like, oh, hang on a sec. Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. Anyway, thanks so much, man. I'll talk to you later.
Thanks, man. It's good to have a chat to you.